Welcome back, detectives. Let's dive into another horrible case. The case of Suzanne Morphew. Suzanne Morphew was born on April 11, 1971, to Jean and Adrian Alexandria. She grew up with two brothers, David and Andrew. Those close to her knew she was a special friend, known for her intelligence and thoughtfulness. In 1998, while still in high school, Suzanne met Barry Morphew. After 6 years of dating, they got married. Barry initially pursued a baseball career, signing with the Toronto Blue Jays, while Suzanne pursued a degree in education at Purdue University. However, after a severe injury cut his sports career short, Barry transitioned into horticulture. Suzanne had 4 years of teaching experience when Barry started his own business, and the company gradually grew over time. The couple had 2 children, Mallorie and Macy. They led an idyllic life in Indiana but faced a setback when Suzanne was diagnosed with Hodgkin's lymphoma. Despite this challenge, Suzanne successfully battled cancer twice. The family eventually moved to Mayville, Colorado, in 2018 in search of a fresh start and to be near their daughter Mallorie, who was attending Western State University. The Suzanne moved to a beautiful 7-acre property that allowed Barry to pursue his love of hunting. He continued working as a contractor and also became a volunteer fireman. Suzanne, on the other hand, retired from her teaching career and devoted more time to her church and a new hobby, sports mountain biking. To outsiders, the Suzannes seemed like the perfect family. However, they had their share of problems. These issues were finally revealed on May 10, 2020. Monday, May 10, 2020, was unlike any other Mother's Day celebration at Suzanne's house. While Suzanne was home alone, her husband Barry and their daughters were out. Barry claimed he had a landscaping appointment in Broomfield, about a 3-hour drive from home, and their children went on a camping trip. They all planned to return home in the evening to celebrate Suzanne's special day. However, when Mallorie and Macy messaged their mother to wish her happy Mother's Day, they didn't receive a response. This was unusual because Suzanne was very active on social media. The girls expected her to be checking her phone for updates, especially since a friend's daughter's wedding was taking place and Suzanne would likely want to see photos. After waiting a few hours without hearing back, the girls grew concerned. They asked their neighbor, Martin Ritter, and his wife for help. Around 4 o'clock or 4:30 p.m. that day, Mrs. Ritter visited the Suzanne house and found it empty. She called Barry to explain the situation and he instructed her to look for Suzanne's mountain bike. If the bike was missing, he told her to contact the police. That's exactly what she did, and soon the police arrived at the Suzanne residence. Barry and their daughters returned home, they anxious to know news of Suzanne's whereabouts. A few hours into the search, the police found a crucial clue. Deputies discovered Suzanne's mountain bike in a steep ravine near the home. The location hinted that Suzanne might have been involved in an accident, but the bike and the surrounding area showed no signs of a struggle. Notably, there were no skid marks from the brakes, no damage to the bike despite its fall down the ravine, no bloodstains, and the nearby lawn appeared untouched. This evidence led the deputies to conclude that the bike had been deliberately placed in the ravine. When they shared this information with Barry, his reaction was unusual. As the investigation into his wife's disappearance proceeded, Barry shared many more implausible stories. As the investigation progressed, his behavior made it obvious that he didn't truly care for his wife. This led to unanswered questions and speculation about Suzanne's disappearance, leading many to suspect Barry's involvement. Barry gave details about his mountain lion story in a secretly recorded conversation with YouTuber Tyson Draper. Notably, Barry was absent from the search parties for Suzanne, organized by her brother Andrew. Andrew doubts Barry's story and offers another possibility: Suzanne actually went missing on May 9th, not on Mother's Day as Barry claimed. It was also discovered that Suzanne's helmet was found 1 mile from their home, in the same direction Barry's truck had traveled that morning. Investigators initially considered this an odd coincidence, but it became more significant when they discovered it was in the opposite direction of the construction site he was set to visit that day. In his initial interview, Barry said he woke up at 4:30 a.m. to an alarm clock and immediately left for Broomfield. However, telematic data from his Ford truck showed he drove 1 mile west before heading to the construction site. When confronted with this data, Barry explained that he was scouting elk earlier that morning. He then anesthetized them and sold their antlers, which was his habit. However, the officers pointed out a flaw in Barry's story. He couldn't have spotted the elk at 4:30 a.m. if he was just waking up. To address this, Barry changed his story, saying he didn't set his alarm for 4:30 a.m. and got up on his own. When asked about the day of Suzanne's disappearance, Barry described it as one of the best days they had had after a long time. He said that morning, he worked briefly with a coworker in Salida and then returned home early. After that, he went on a hike with Suzanne, followed by a grilled steak dinner and intimacy. Barry stated they went to bed together. However, it is essential to note that Barry is not a reliable source of information. During the police investigation into Barry, it was discovered that he had lied about the whole thing that happened that night. The first signs of deception were uncovered by investigators on May 9, 2020, when they reviewed the telematic data from Barry's vehicle and his phone records. Although Barry had indeed spent the afternoon and evening with Suzanne, the details did not match his initial story. One of the discrepancies occurred between 10:42 and 10:47. According to his phone data, Barry's movements around the property were unusual. When questioned by investigators about this inconsistency, Barry claimed he was probably hunting chipmunks with tranquilizers at the time. It was also revealed that Barry had switched his phone to airplane mode at 2:47 p.m. and left it in that mode until 10:17 p.m., which further raised suspicions. Additionally, investigators found evidence that contradicted Barry's claim of having a steak dinner with his wife. They discovered only one dirty dish, suggesting that Barry had eaten alone. As the investigation continued, more unusual occurrences were discovered on their plot of land. The police found additional suspicious details while reviewing the data from later that night. 1 hour after Barry claimed to have gone to sleep with his wife at 8:30 p.m., his car was seen backing up 96 feet from the driveway at 9:30 p.m. This led investigators to speculate that this could be when Barry loaded his wife's body into the truck. If he was indeed guilty. Furthermore, the records showed that between 3:25 and 3:48, the truck door opened and closed over 80 times, which, although indirect, suggested that Barry might be hiding something from the police, causing them must dig deeper into the incident that occurred on May 10th. Investigations involving Barry co-workers revealed that he had no reason to be in Broomfield on the day in question. The contract didn't start until a week later, so there was no project to inspect. Barry initially claimed that his only activities that day involved visiting the Holiday Inn, the work site for an upcoming project, a store for granola and water, and a stop at McDonald's to clean his windshield. However, surveillance footage obtained by the Colorado Bureau of Investigation contradicted his story. The footage showed that Barry disposed of 5 trash bags near the Holiday Inn and McDonald's. This increases suspicion about his actions. When police questioned Barry about the footage of him disposing of trash bags he gave an unusual explanation. He claimed that he wanted to avoid paying for disposal fees so he could clean his car. However, his story fell apart when officers searched his vehicle. Barry's suspicious behavior was further highlighted by a coworker who reported a strong smell of bleach and chlorine in his hotel room a day after Suzanne disappeared. In addition, investigators found that Barry had changed his clothes multiple times throughout that day. Investigators then delved deeper into Barry and Suzanne's personal lives. Their daughter revealed that her parents' marriage was not as happy as Barry had initially suggested. Text messages on Suzanne's phone confirmed this. Suzanne was deeply unhappy in the marriage and discussed her desire for a divorce, which Barry refused. Suzanne kept a list of grievances in her Notes app, detailing a pattern of physical abuse by her husband Barry. She expressed fear of being alone with him and was concerned about his heavy drinking and attempts to take her phone. Suzanne also suspected him of being unfaithful. In an attempt to catch him in the act, she purchased a pen with a hidden recording device, but it ironically captured evidence of her own affair instead. The investigation revealed that Suzanne had been having an affair with a man named Jeff, a high school acquaintance, for about a year and a half, starting in 2018. Although Jeff initially appeared to be a potential suspect, he was later cleared of any involvement in Suzanne's disappearance. However, investigators discovered a note that suggested Barry had found out about the affair and might have accused her of having a boyfriend just 2 days before she went missing. During their search of the Suzanne house, police uncovered several crucial pieces of evidence, including the cap of a tranquilizer dart in the dryer and the spent bullet casing in the bedroom. They also found a large crack in the doorframe and a charred remnant of Suzanne's journal in the fireplace. These findings, combined with telematic data, suggested that Barry might have killed Suzanne on May 9, 2020. Phone records from Suzanne's phone supported her initial story. After texting Jeff 53 times and sending a selfie at approximately 2:10 p.m., the phone showed no further activity. It wasn't until 2 weeks later that the public discovered Barry was a suspect in his wife's disappearance. This revelation came when police excavated a construction site in Salida, one of Barry's job sites, over the course of 2 days. In response, Barry released a video to the public maintaining his innocence. It was not until May 5, 2021, nearly a year into the investigation, that Barry was arrested. While the evidence against him was largely circumstantial, the prosecution felt confident in their case. Due to the inconsistencies in Barry's alibis, his repeated lies, and a clear motive. Barry was charged with multiple crimes, including the first-degree murder of his wife, tampering with physical evidence, possessing a dangerous weapon, and attempting to influence a public servant. Barry accepted the charges and paid a $600 fine. A preliminary hearing took place in August 2021 to decide if the case should go to trial, at which point most of the case details were made public. The prosecution presented its evidence over 4 days, outlining its theory of the incident. They claimed that on May 9, 2020, Barry killed his wife, dismembered her body in a hotel room, disposed of the tools, and buried her remains in an unmarked grave. However, Barry's defense strongly challenged the prosecution's narrative, pointing out inconsistencies in their story. They cited that cadaver dogs found no signs of human remains in Barry's car or the hotel room where he supposedly brought the body. The defense also raised doubts about the dart bullet cover, suggesting it may have been planted. Furthermore, the defense argued that Barry's dart gun was broken at the time, making it impossible for him to use it in the murder. The defense team's apparently piece of evidence was partial DNA found in Suzanne's Range Rover and on her bike helmet, which didn't match Barry. What made this discovery significant was that the DNA in her car matched DNA profiles from 3 unsolved sexual assault cases in Chicago and Arizona. This raised doubt about Barry's guilt. However, the CBI investigator in charge of the case was unable to present this crucial evidence earlier because he had to take a leave of absence for military service before. It wasn't until September 7 that the judge decided to move forward with the case, setting Barry's bail at $500,000. He was released from county jail on September 20, 2021. However, in a surprising move, the prosecution filed a motion to dismiss all charges against Barry without prejudice. At the time, the the prosecution faced several challenges, including a lack of concrete evidence, as no body had been found. Additionally, the prosecution had missed multiple deadlines, resulting in the exclusion of 14 key witnesses from the trial. Barry was seen leaving the courthouse with his 2 daughters, visibly relieved. Nearly 2 years later, on September 22, 2023, investigators made a breakthrough in the case when they discovered several shallow graves in Moffat, Colorado. Suzanne's remains were identified through dental records and a chemotherapy port, found over 50 miles away from the initial search area. The discovery of Suzanne's body has raised fresh questions about Barry's potential involvement in her murder. Although the charges against him were previously dismissed, the new evidence has led many to wonder if he could still be considered a suspect in the case. Some people question how Barry could have disposed of the body without being in Moffat on May 9th and 10th, suggesting he might have had help. For now, Barry does not appear to be directly involved in where his wife's body was found. The police and district attorney's office continue to investigate the case. The 12th Judicial District's district attorney stated that they cannot comment on the case until more information becomes available, while offering condolences to Suzanne's family. Barry's attorney, Iris E.T. Yen, speculates that Suzanne might have been the victim of a serial killer. After finding her remains in a cemetery, Iris thinks that law enforcement wrongly accused Barry and hopes that they will admit their mistake. Barry has initiated a $15 million lawsuit against the prosecutors, sheriff stations, and investigators because he was wrongly accused in the disappearance and death of his wife. Hello friends, welcome to our channel. Today we're going to take a look at another horrible case with you. The case of Kelly Clayton. Kelly Clayton, also known as Kelly Stage Clayton, resides in Cotton, New York. Kelly Clayton had a promising life ahead of her. In high school, she was an exemplary student, excelling academically and serving as a role model for her peers. Her academic achievements were impressive, and she passed exams with ease. Despite her academic focus, Kelly's appearance was often described as model-like, and she could have pursued a career in modeling if she had chosen to do so. Following high school, Kelly enrolled in a teacher training university to become a chemistry teacher, which brought immense pride to her parents. However, after a few years, Kelly suddenly lost interest in her studies. It is unclear what triggered this change, but she eventually withdrew from the university and informed her parents that she no longer wanted to pursue a teaching career. Kelly felt that she was too young to be confined to a life of grading notebooks and managing classrooms. Instead, she expressed a desire to travel and experience life to the fullest. Her parents were disappointed and upset by her decision, leading to a 6-month estrangement from their daughter. Kelly's life took an unexpected turn when she met Tom Clayton at a party hosted by mutual friends. Tom was immediately smitten with Kelly and began showering her with attention. His athletic physique and attractive appearance made him a standout, which wasn't surprising given his successful hockey career. As a semi-professional player for the Jackal team, Tom was known for his strength and aggression on the ice. However, he realized his hockey career would eventually end due to physical limitations. Tom would have to retire and enjoy the game from the sidelines, either by attending live matches or watching his favorite team on television. They continued with their lives, starting by returning to New York to get married. They then moved to North Carolina and eventually settled in the small town of Cato, which had only a few thousand residents. Tom started a franchise that specialized in rebuilding houses damaged by fires or disasters. He also worked for a friend's company in a related field. Kelly, on the other hand, had dropped out of university and was working as a waitress. Although she changed jobs, she continued to work even after having 2 children. Tom's income was sufficient for the family, and Kelly could have quit her job to care for their daughters, but she chose to continue working to earn extra money. She used this extra income to buy toys and pamper her children. On September 28, 2015, Tom went to play poker with his friends, the Millers, as he usually did. He preferred to attend these gatherings alone, as playing for money required a certain level of skill and experience. Additionally, someone had to stay home with the children, and bringing the whole family would have turned the evening into a noisy and chaotic affair, detracting from the enjoyment of the game. That evening, Tom was on a losing streak, but instead of giving up, he tried to win back his losses. He suggested that anyone who wanted to stay and play until morning was welcome to do so, but no one took him up on the offer, and he ended up going home. At home, a horrific scene unfolded before Tom's eyes. His wife lay in a pool of her own blood, severely beaten and, at first glance, appeared lifeless. Panicked, Tom frantically searched the rooms for his children. Fortunately, they were unharmed but terrified. He quickly scooped up his daughters and rushed to his neighbor Derek's house, desperate to shield them from the gruesome sight of their mother's battered body. From Derek's house, Tom called the police, struggling to process the chaos. The officer who arrived at the scene found Tom kneeling beside his wife's body, attempting to administer CPR. However, the emergency medical technicians soon intervened and pulled Tom away, revealing the devastating truth: Kelly had been deceased for an extended period, and nothing could be done to revive her. The house was in disarray, with blood covering both floors. The bedroom showed signs of an intense struggle between Kelly and her killer, who carried out the brutal act despite the presence of children in the house. It appeared Kelly had been pushed down the stairs, as evidenced by the broken banister, and brutally beaten with a blunt object until the killer was certain she was dead. No signs of knife or gunshot wounds were found. The officer filming the crime scene observed that Tom seemed lost and in shock. He wandered aimlessly, briefly entering the room before exiting, and was unable to provide the officer with basic information, such as the location of the children's room or the emergency exit. However, when asked about his whereabouts during the murder, Tom calmly stated he had spent the evening at a friend's house playing poker. The officer, failing to obtain clear information from Tom, proceeded to question the neighbor and the children. Tom's eldest daughter, Charlie, described the perpetrator as a robber. According to Charlie, she and her sister were drifting off to sleep when they heard their mother scream loudly from the next room. Their mother yelled, "Charlie, run away from here," and then the whole house shook violently. They cautiously left their room and saw the perpetrator leaning over their mother, beating her with what looked like a hammer. They ran back into the nursery, blocked the door with a small nightstand, and hid under the bed. Fortunately, the perpetrator wasn't looking for them, as the nightstand wouldn't have been enough to stop him. When asked to describe the perpetrator, Charlie said he was big, like a bear. He wore blue jeans, a black shirt, and a mask similar to the one her father wears when hunting. Charlie also noted that the perpetrator's eyes looked like her father's, but she didn't remember anything else, as she only caught a brief glimpse before getting scared and running away. Police officers investigating the house couldn't find evidence to support her claim that the perpetrator was a burglar. There were no signs of forced entry at the front or back doors, but the garage gate was open, which could have been an entry point. However, nothing was stolen from the house, including jewelry and cash, and the cabinets were all closed. This was unusual, as burglars typically search every area. Officers quickly suspected that Tom, was involved in the murder. They believed he was pretending to be a grieving husband and had actually killed his wife to collect insurance payments. If Kelly's life was insured, Tom could potentially receive up to $1 million. The police just needed to gather evidence to solve the case, especially since the daughter mentioned that the perpetrator's mask and eyes resembled her father's. However, the police couldn't find the hunting mask in the house. After discovering Tom's whereabouts on the night in question, the police interviewed the other poker players. One of Tom's friends was incredulous. "You think Tom is the killer? That's unbelievable. His wife was just murdered, and instead of finding the real culprit, you're focusing on him. Another friend, less emotional, chimed in, Tom couldn't have done it. He worked 2 jobs non-stop because he loved Kelly and their kids. It's just not possible. Besides, he was with us the entire night, playing poker. Even when everyone else was tired, he wanted to keep playing. Laura, an acquaintance of Tom's, shared her concerns during a break in the game. She recalled that Tom had asked to borrow her phone, claiming he had left his in the car, which was only 10 meters away. Laura found this odd but lent him her phone anyway. Tom stepped outside to make the call, but when Laura checked her phone's call history later, there was no record of the call, suggesting that Tom had deleted it. Laura discussed this incident with her husband, who had been sitting next to Tom at the poker table. He noticed that Tom wasn't paying attention to the game, instead keeping his head down, focusing on something on the table. It turned out that Tom had his phone with him the whole time, which raised more questions. Why did Tom borrow Laura's phone if he had his own? Who was he trying to call, and why couldn't he use his own phone? After Laura's testimony, the police re-questioned Charlie, Tom's daughter, and she reiterated that the robber resembled her father. The next testimony came from the niece of Kelly. She explained that she hadn't told her Aunt Kelly about Tom's true nature because she didn't want to upset Kelly. Aunt Kelly adored Tom. The niece felt her truth wasn't needed, implying that it wouldn't change anything. The niece saw Tom as a person with 2 sides. On the surface, he appeared caring and attentive, often showering Aunt Kelly with attention and gifts, and even helping with childcare, which is more than many fathers do. However, his behavior at work revealed a completely different personality. Recognizing her niece's concerns about being young and alone, Aunt Kelly had set up a job for her with Tom the previous summer. During her employment, the niece handled tasks such as correspondence, registration, and managing documents. At first, her interactions with Tom were strictly professional, mainly because she didn't know him well before working for him. One day, Tom got drunk and came to the office, revealing to the niece that his family life was a facade. He confessed to loving his daughters, but not his wife, Aunt Kelly. He had been unfaithful, having multiple affairs during their marriage, and considered leaving her but stayed due to financial concerns. It was later also confirmed by female participants of a poker game that Tom was indeed unfaithful, having relationships with 2 women present at the game. Additionally, Kelly's 16-year-old niece shared information about Michael Beard, another employee of Tom's firm. Michael was doing repair work on houses after a fire, but there were frequent reports of items going missing from the houses where he worked. Tom initially doubted his customers when they accused Michael Beard of theft during fire restoration jobs. However, as the complaints continued, it became clear that Michael was indeed stealing from clients. Additionally, there were allegations of Michael showing up to work intoxicated. When Tom finally confronted Michael about his behavior, he was understandably upset and disappointed. Despite having every right to be angry, Tom took a surprisingly compassionate approach. Instead of simply firing Michael and cutting ties, Tom actively reached out to other companies and recommended Michael for a job. When none of those opportunities panned out, Tom took it a step further and offered Michael work around his own house, doing odd jobs like cutting the grass, watering plants, and making minor repairs. This decision showed that Tom was willing to give Michael a second chance, even if it meant finding alternative employment for his former employee. The detective brought Michael Beard in for questioning. Michael claimed he only stole because he and his family were in dire need of money. He expressed his gratitude towards Tom, his former employer, who had always defended him. Michael also praised Tom's wife, who had shown kindness by feeding him and giving his children old clothes. However, the investigation took a turn when Michael's wife, Holly, was interrogated. She revealed that Tom had offered Michael a job, which Michael had not mentioned earlier, and promised to pay him $10,000 for it. This new information raised suspicions about Michael's alibi. He was called back to the station and hooked up to a lie detector. The test results indicated that Michael was lying, and he eventually cracked under pressure and began to confess. The investigation was sparked by the death of Kelly, which had shaken Michael. He had even attended church to pray for her soul, showing that he was genuinely distraught by her passing. Despite initial doubts about his involvement, the police had released him after the first round of questioning. However, Holly's testimony changed everything. Tom promised Michael $10,000 to kill his wife, Kelly, and make it look like an accident. The plan was for Michael to sneak into the house while Tom was playing poker, strangle Kelly, and then start a fire to cover up the crime. The house was insured for a large sum of money. Michael found 2 cans of gasoline waiting for him in the garage, which he would use to set the fire. He quietly entered the house while everyone was asleep. He crept upstairs to Kelly's bedroom, but she was either awake or woken by the sound of the door. She saw Michael and began screaming. Kelly's screaming startled Michael, and he tried to strangle her. However, Kelly was stronger than she appeared and fought back. A fierce struggle ensued, moving from the bedroom to the kitchen. Michael was surprised by Kelly's strength, which made the fight much more intense than he had anticipated. Michael was in a state of shock and panic, flailing his arms wildly and grabbing at Kelly's clothes, unable to focus on the fight. In contrast, Kelly was fighting for her life, accurately aiming her blows at Michael's face. If the police had arrived at Michael's location sooner, they would have seen evidence of the beating he had taken. After a prolonged struggle, Michael slammed Kelly's head into the wall with great force, knocking her to the ground. She was unable to get up for some time. Michael then produced a hammer and continued to strike Kelly's head until she showed no signs of life. Consumed by rage and panic, Michael fled the house, forgetting that Tom had instructed him not only to kill Kelly but also to set fire to the house to conceal the crime. Mark Blandford, Michael's accomplice, was just the driver. Knowing Michael from working together and staying with him, Mark had not been surprised when Michael, known for petty theft, had asked him to drive during a break-in. Mark had mentioned that he had initially wanted to decline Michael's request, but that the offer of $500 had been tempting. After some deliberation, Michael had convinced him to participate. Michael's plan had been to rob a businessman, and he had needed Mark's assistance to make a quick getaway before the police arrived. Michael had also promised to help with the car. Mark had eventually agreed, but only on the condition that he could park the car at a safe distance from the house. Michael had accepted this condition. That evening, Mark had waited for Michael in the car in a dark alley, and Michael had come back quickly enough, breathing heavily and telling him to move as fast as possible. Michael hadn't had any bag or sack on him, which hadn't looked much like a robbery. Mark hadn't asked him any questions along the way, simply because he hadn't wanted to know anything. He had just wanted his $500, which he hadn't ended up getting. On the way out, Michael had asked Mark to stop at a bridge over a creek a couple blocks south of there. Mark had stopped there, and Michael had hastily stripped off his outer garments and thrown them off the bridge. Mark had offered to show the place if needed. Indeed, police officers who had arrived on the scene at Mark's behest had found parts of Michael's outer clothing near the creek, as well as the hammer used to kill Kelly. Michael, already in custody on suspicion of first-degree murder, began to change his testimony. According to him, he was indeed hired by Tom, indeed for $10,000, but only to commit arson at the house and nothing more. Michael spent a very long time assuring the police of his innocence, and all because he did not know that Mark had shown the place where Michael had thrown out his things, and that his clothes, as well as the murder weapon, had already been submitted for examination. And the experts found both on his clothes and on the hammer the blood of Kelly Clayton. And that was the most direct proof that it was him who killed Kelly, not someone else. Tom denied ordering the massacre of his wife, claiming Michael acted alone. According to Tom, Michael knew Tom had money and was motivated by resentment over losing his job. Tom suggested Michael robbed his house, unaware Kelly was home, resulting in her death. However, Laura, a woman who played poker with Tom, revealed that Tom used her cell phone to make a call. The detective obtained the call records, confirming suspicions. The records showed Tom called Michael on the night of September 28 to 29. Michael was tried first and maintained he was hired to set fire to the house for insurance purposes. He claimed he didn't kill Kelly and the blood on his clothes came from touching her dead body. He had disposed of his belongings to avoid suspicion of being at the Claytons' house that night. His testimony seemed convincing. The jury deliberated for 7 hours before delivering a guilty verdict on all counts against Michael Beard, who now faced life imprisonment. In contrast, Tom's lawyers managed to gather records of conversations and correspondence between Tom and Michael, but none of these clearly mentioned their nefarious plan. Furthermore, the prosecution's attempts to obtain billing transcripts of Tom's movements yielded no concrete evidence. All the evidence against Tom was circumstantial. However, one key detail caught the attention of investigators. The car in which Mark had given Michael a ride was registered to Tom's company. Moreover, on the day of the incident, Tom had arrived at the office in his personal Toyota but then switched to the company's pickup truck, which was later driven to Michael's house and left there. The truck was returned to the office the day after the tragedy. This suggested that Tom had, in fact, provided Michael with the car that he and Mark used to commit the crime. It was a crucial piece of evidence that the jury testified to during the trial. The 6-day trial concluded with the jury finding Tom guilty of hiring Michael to commit the heinous crime. Michael subsequently appealed, using the testimony of young Charlie, who claimed that the eyes behind the mask belonged to her father. However, the court dismissed the appeal due to the matching description of the clothing found under the bridge. Consequently, Tom Clayton and Michael Beard were sentenced to life in prison. Mark received a 4-year prison sentence for manslaughter. The custody of Tom and Kelly's children was awarded to Kelly's sister, Kim. With time, Charlie has learned to cope with the tragedy. Although she occasionally remembers her mother, she refuses to discuss her father, whom she will never want to see again. Hello friends, welcome to our channel. Today we're going to take a look at another horrible case with you, the case of Kaylee Mandotti. Kaylee Mandotti was born on August 20, 1998, in Webster, Texas, to parents Tack Mandotti and Allison Steele. Her family enjoyed a comfortable lifestyle, with her mother working as a scientist and her father serving as an international executive director at MGM Resorts. Following her parents' divorce, Kaylee's mother, Allison, married NASA engineer Lawrence Buten, who resided in Houston. Although Kaylee's parents were separated, she maintained a close relationship with her father and regularly stayed in touch. Her stepfather, Lawrence, adored Kaylee and became a loving second father figure to her. Kaylee was an exceptional individual, cherished by her family and friends. She excelled as a student, team member, sister, and companion, spreading joy with her infectious laughter and kind heart. Throughout her academic career, Kaylee consistently demonstrated academic excellence and actively participated in extracurricular activities. Her diverse interests included horseback riding, piano playing, and theatrical performances. As a Girl Scout, Kaylee spent time exploring the Clear Lake neighborhood with friends and embarking on hikes with her parents. Upon graduating with honors from Clear Creek High School in League City, Texas, in 2016, Kaylee continued to pursue her passions. With a deep love for animals, Kaylee volunteered with a group called Animal Therapy. Her adventurous spirit drove her to seek out new experiences, and she aspired to try extreme sports and explore uncharted territories, always seeking thrilling experiences that brought her joy. At 19, Kaylee was a sophomore at Trinity University in San Antonio, studying communications. She was popular, with many friends, and led the cheerleading squad for the football team. Her beauty and charisma drew many admirers. During a football game, she met 22-year-old Mark Howerton, a tall, athletic professional baseball player. Initially, Kaylee didn't notice Mark, as she was interested in someone else, Jet. However, Mark was immediately smitten with Kaylee, captivated by her large black eyes and charm. Mark and Kaylee started dating in September 2017, despite their first 2 meetings not going well. Friends thought they were mismatched, as both were emotional and quick-tempered. Their relationship was marked by intense arguments and jealousy. Kaylee often had bruises and was afraid to retrieve her phone from Mark, a disturbing sign of the toxic relationship. The situation gets worse when Mark became aggressive, pulled out a gun, and threatened violence. Kaylee knew about her boyfriend's jealous nature and temper, but she would reassure her friends and ask them not to discuss their loud arguments publicly. However, on September 24, 2017, around 1 a.m., Kaylee's roommates had had enough and called the police due to loud noises and a man yelling and threatening violence coming from Kaylee's room. When the officer arrived, Mark was alone in the room, and Kaylee declined to press charges, downplaying the incident as just a lover's quarrel. Kaylee's friends suspected Mark of using controlled substances, which led to his angry outbursts. They recalled an incident where he threatened to throw Kaylee off a balcony and reported it to the police. Despite their tumultuous relationship, they was deeply in love during calm moments. On October 29th, they attended the Mala Luna Music Festival in San Antonio, a major event with Gothic and industrial music. Mark and Kaylee were enjoying a fun time with their friends at a festival until Kaylee's ex-partner unexpectedly appeared, causing tension between Mark and Kaylee. They got into a big argument and left the festival early. Their friends didn't see them again that night. 6 hours later, Mark pulled up to a hospital in his black Mercedes, frantically seeking help. The medical staff found Kaylee unconscious and partially undressed in the front seat. The car was a mess, with her clothes scattered everywhere, and she was slumped forward, unresponsive. The hospital staff rushed Kaylee to the emergency room, where Mark revealed that they had taken illegal substances before the festival. This information helped doctors treat her for a possible overdose. Kaylee was then transferred to a specialized medical facility in Kyle, Texas, where a nurse with expertise in intimate assault cases examined her. The nurse found additional bruises on Kaylee's arms, legs, and ear. Further examination revealed that Kaylee had suffered blunt force trauma to the face and head, which ultimately led to her death. It became clear that Kaylee had been Kaylee of a fatal assault. Police launched an investigation into the death of Kaylee Mandotti, focusing on Mark as the primary suspect since he was the last person seen with her on the night of her death. During police interviews, Mark raised suspicions by repeatedly changing his story and omitting crucial details. Surveillance footage revealed that he and Kaylee had been to places that Mark had not mentioned in his account. As the investigation continued, it was discovered that Mark had a history of aggressive behavior towards Kaylee, according to her friends and family. One of her sisters even expressed fear of him. The police uncovered previous incidents of violence between they, including an instance where Mark hit Kaylee's head against a car window and vandalized her dorm room at Trinity University. When Kaylee's parents learned about Mark's history of abuse, they were devastated. Her mother, Allison Steele, filed a lawsuit against Trinity University, alleging that the school failed to protect her daughter from Mark's attacks. The lawsuit, filed in Becker County District Court, also named Mark as a defendant, claiming that he killed Kaylee in a jealous rage. The lawsuit claims that Mark Howerton assaulted 19-year-old Kaylee Mandotti, resulting in her death. It also alleges that Trinity University staff, administrators, and campus police were aware of Howerton's violent behavior and threats to harm Kaylee, including physical harm and breaking her face. Despite this knowledge, the university failed to take action to protect Kaylee in the weeks leading up to her death. A Trinity University spokesperson declined to comment on the lawsuit, citing the ongoing legal process. The lawsuit states that the university's inaction, despite numerous reports of harassment, intimidation, domestic violence, and gender discrimination, led to Kaylee's tragic death. The lawsuit argues that if Trinity University had intervened as it should have, Kaylee's death could have been prevented. The university failed to follow its own policy on investigating and responding to potential cases of relationship violence and harassment. After an incident in his dorm room, Mark was banned from campus for a year due to a criminal trespass order. Despite this, he continued to violate the order. Furthermore, detectives uncovered numerous accounts of Mark's violent behavior towards Kaylee during their relationship. One of Kaylee's sisters reported that Mark threatened to throw Kaylee off a balcony during an argument. Another sister claimed that Mark threatened to shoot some of Kaylee's ex-boyfriend's brothers with a gun. Based on these allegations, the police issued a warrant for Mark's arrest in February 2018. He turned himself in to the authorities. Following the discovery of Kaylee's disarrayed room at the university, Mark faced multiple charges, including criminal acts, intimate violence, and abduction. However, he pleaded not guilty to all charges. The first trial regarding Kaylee's death began in December 2019. Prosecutors argued that Mark, known for his volatile temperament, fatally assaulted Kaylee in a fit of rage. They claimed that he drove her around for nearly 6 hours before taking her to the hospital. In his defense, Mark's lawyers suggested that Kaylee's death could be attributed to various factors, including the presence of banned substances in her system, which may have caused a spike in blood pressure or head trauma during intimate activity. Kaylee's mother described the injuries on her daughter's body as severe, comparable to those from a plane crash. The injuries were indeed extensive, as evident from photos shown to the Bayhart County jurors. The images depict Kaylee, a sophomore at Trinity University from San Antonio, Texas, with severe bruises, red marks and scratches all over her body, from head to toe. Both her eyelids were swollen and bruised. Only her back and the back of her legs showed no signs of injury. Dr. Suzanne Morphew, the forensic pathologist who conducted Kaylee Mandotti's autopsy, took graphics and photographs that revealed a subdural hematoma on the right side of Kaylee's brain. This type of injury is typically associated with traumatic brain damage. Kaylee's father, Tilak Kaylee, became emotional after seeing 2 photos of his daughter in the ICU, where she lay in a vegetative state, surrounded by numerous tubes, with her face barely visible. Dr. Suzanne Morphew testified about the severe head and facial injuries she found on Kaylee. These injuries included a dent in her skull, eye trauma, and extensive bruising on her jaws, mouth, gums, lips, and cheeks. There were also hemorrhages in both eyes. Dr. Dana concluded that Kaylee's death was caused by head and facial trauma from a blunt object. However, Dr. William Anderson disagreed with this conclusion after reviewing the autopsy results. He pointed out that there were no fractures in the eye sockets, nose, or face, which suggested that Kaylee was not attacked from the front. Instead, Dr. Anderson believed that Kaylee's injuries were more consistent with a fall and subsequent medical treatment. Defense attorney John Hunter presented an alternative explanation, arguing that the prosecution lacked sufficient evidence to determine what happened to Kaylee Mandotti the night of the incident, making it impossible to prove Mark Howardman's involvement. During the trial, Hunter frequently highlighted Kaylee's history of drug use, including her treatment for substance dependence at a hospital. Professor Jason Wallach from the University of Sciences in Philadelphia testified that Kaylee had a high level of MDMA, ecstasy, or Molly, in her blood when her boyfriend took her to the hospital on October 29, 2017. The presence of this substance can turn a minor head injury fatal. Hunter stated that MDMA affects people differently, causing increased body temperature or electrolyte imbalances that can lead to loss of consciousness. Mark Howerton told investigators that he and Kaylee had an argument and engaged in consensual rough intimacy before she lost consciousness, but the origin and timing of her bruises remained unexplained. In December 2019, Allison believed Mark Howerton would be found responsible for her daughter's death. However, the trial ended in a mistrial due to the jury's inability to reach a verdict. Mark's defense claimed Kaylee's injuries were caused by hospital staff, leading to the hung jury in the 144th District Court, presided over by Judge Raymond Angeline. Because the jury was unable to reach a verdict, the case was dismissed, and Mark was acquitted of the charges in the first trial, leaving the case unresolved. District Attorney Joe Gonzalez, who had been handling the case from the beginning, expressed disappointment with the outcome and stated that he would review the case again. During this time, Kaylee's parents, Allison and Lawrence, began their own investigation. They gathered evidence and autopsy reports from the police and focused on a small, round bruise near their daughter's ear. They speculated that Mark might have hit her head against the car window, causing her to hit the door lock and get bruised. They hoped this new information would establish Mark's guilt. Lawrence found a similar Mercedes to Mark's and recreated the incident with photos. With the Texas Rangers' help, Lawrence got records and affidavits for an arrest warrant for assault and mischief. The records provided a detailed timeline of events leading up to Kaylee's death and evidence found during the investigation. The authorities expose Mark Howerton's alleged deception to the Rangers and reveal the evidence that resulted in his arrest. Prosecutors described Howerton as a controlling boyfriend who constantly called Kaylee Mandotti, took away her phone, and isolated her from friends. 2 weeks before Kaylee's death, Howerton physically assaulted her, pushing her against a brick wall and trashing her dorm room. After the incident, Kaylee asked for space, but Howerton responded with dozens of messages, including a threat to end his life. Kaylee pleaded with him not to harm himself. That evening, Howerton called Kaylee around 200 times. Later, they attended a festival where they argued over Kaylee's ex-boyfriend. Mark Howerton took Kaylee from the festival, drove her to a deserted parking lot near the Whataburger headquarters, and spent over an hour there, according to GPS camera records. Prosecutors believe that it was in this parking lot where Mark Howerton attacked and killed Kaylee Mandotti. Kaylee Mandotti's family expressed gratitude to the Texas Rangers for their diligent efforts in securing suitable criminal charges against Kaylee's alleged attacker. Mark Howerton's pre-trial began in June 2023. During the trial, the prosecution initially considered presenting a video recorded by Kaylee's parents in the hospital that showed her injuries, but ultimately decided not to use it. The prosecution took into account evidence gathered with the assistance of the Texas Rangers, despite potential complications and new disputes. Mark Howerton was found guilty of aggravated assault resulting in bodily harm that led to a lethal outcome. He was sentenced to 20 years in prison, a fine of $110,000, and ordered to pay restitution to Kaylee Mandotti's family. Furthermore, he was prohibited from contacting over 20 individuals connected to the case. Now over 30 years old, Mark is serving his sentence in the Wilkes County Jail and will be eligible for parole in 2033. The conviction brought some closure to Kaylee's family, but felt the sentence was not enough for their loss. In the second trial, Mark Howerton faced additional charges, including aggravated assault and criminally negligent homicide, on top of the initial manslaughter charge. The prosecution changed its strategy to build a stronger case against him. However, Kaylee's family and prosecutors were unhappy with the outcome and pushed for a retrial. Kaylee Mandotti's tragic story shows the devastating effects of violence on a young life and her family's struggle for justice. Kaylee's story is a powerful reminder of the consequences of violence against young people with promising futures. Despite the conviction, her family believes the verdict does not bring justice for their daughter. In 2021, Allison filed a civil lawsuit against Trinity University, alleging negligence in protecting her daughter. She claimed the university failed to inform Kaylee's guardians about Mark Howerton's destructive behavior in her dorm room and took no action against him, allowing him continued access to her daughter. It is unclear whether evidence collected by Allison and Lawrence was presented during Mark Howerton's trial. However, in 2023, he was found guilty of aggravated assault causing bodily harm, despite being acquitted of the more serious charge. Prosecutors noted that Kaylee's family was satisfied with the verdict, as it brought an end to the prolonged legal proceedings. Hello friends, welcome to our channel. Today we're going to take a look at another horrible case with you. The case of Sarah Stern. Sarah Elizabeth Sarah was born on March 24, 1997, in Neptune City, New Jersey, to Michael and Susan Sarah. As their only child, Sarah received all the love and attention from her parents, who had been unable to have more children due to health issues. Sarah grew up to be a lively, cheerful, and outgoing child. She was involved in various activities, including school theater, photography, drawing, swimming, and softball. Her passion was art, and she aspired to become an artist or designer. After graduating from high school, Sarah enrolled in a local college to pursue her dream. Tragedy struck in the autumn of 2013 when Sarah's mother, Susan, passed away after a long battle with cancer. Despite periods of remission, the disease ultimately took its toll. This devastating loss was a tremendous shock to the family, particularly for Sarah, who was extremely close to her mother. After a period of struggling with depression, Sarah began to support her ailing father and care for their beloved dog, Buddy. As time passed, her life started to improve, and she set goals for the future. Upon graduating from college, Sarah planned to apply to a prestigious university in New York. Before pursuing further education, she hoped to travel the world, with a particular interest in visiting Canada and possibly even living there for a while. Her father, Michael Sarah, frequently traveled out of state for work, often for weeks at a time. However, he never worried about leaving Sarah alone, as she was a grown and independent young woman, and their town was considered safe. But on the night of December 3, 2016, around 2:30 a.m., an unsettling incident occurred. A concerned citizen reported an abandoned vehicle on the Belmar Bridge along Highway 35, prompting the police to become involved. The area was usually deserted at night, which made the lone, empty vehicle stand out. A taxi driver, who was taking a shortcut home across the old bridge on the outskirts, noticed the car parked on the side of the road. He stopped to see if anyone needed assistance, but found the vehicle empty with no one around. Concerned that the driver might have jumped into the water below, a tragic occurrence that had happened before in this spot, the taxi driver called the police. Police officers responding to the scene found the car's keys in the ignition and no signs of blood or struggle, leading them to initially believe that the owner may have intentionally left the car on the bridge to jump into the river. To investigate further, they checked the car's ownership and discovered it belonged to 85-year-old Lily Sarah, who lived in a nearby town. When officers visited Lily's home, they found her alive and well. She explained that she hadn't driven the car in years due to poor eyesight, and her 19-year-old granddaughter, Sarah, was the frequent driver. Lily tried to contact Sarah but was unable to reach her because her phone was turned off. She then provided the officers with her son's address, where Sarah lived, and informed them that Sarah was likely alone, as her father was out of town for work and wouldn't return until the following week. Sarah was nowhere to be found at her home. Although the back door was open, an initial search of the house didn't turn up any signs of foul play. However, they did find the family dog locked in one of the bedrooms, whining. Despite the open back door, there were no signs of disarray or struggle, and no evidence of an intruder. As the news of her disappearance spread, Sarah's father, Michael, rushed back home on the next available flight. Upon his arrival, he confirmed that everything was still in its place and nothing was missing. Notably, all of Sarah's personal belongings, including her passport, driver's license, and mobile phone, were still at the house. The police shared their initial concerns with Michael, suggesting that Sarah might have gone to the nearby bridge with intentions to harm herself. They asked if he had noticed any warning signs of suicidal tendencies or self-harm. Michael revealed that Sarah had struggled with depression after her mother's passing, but had made a full recovery with the help of loved ones and her studies. In fact, Sarah had big plans for her future, aspiring to become a designer and travel the world. To piece together what happened, the police needed to know who Sarah had contact with on the day she vanished, what conversations she had, and who saw her last. The first witnesses to come forward revealed that Sarah had spent most of December 2nd with her childhood friend, Liam McAtasney. As the last person to see her, Liam was a crucial part of the investigation. The police quickly decided to speak with him to gather more information and reconstruct the events of that day. When the police arrived at the McAtasney residence, they met with Liam's mother, who told them that her son was sleeping after a night shift. The officers asked her to wake Liam, who seemed confused about the situation. Once he was informed about Sarah's disappearance, Liam confirmed that they had spent the previous day together and agreed to go to the police station to give a statement. Liam shared that he and Sarah had attended college classes together that morning, but they decided to skip the last 2 lectures and go to her place to unwind instead. At her house, they played video games, chatted about their plans, and socialized. They briefly left her house twice to pick up food and visit a local supermarket. Liam left Sarah's house around 7 p.m. to go to his night shift job and did not see her again. Liam was also asked if Sarah had been struggling with any mental health issues. He explained that she had been battling deep depression since her mother passed away. He shared that Sarah often felt hopeless, wanting to escape or end her life, but he did not think that this meant she was planning to harm herself. He noted that she also struggled to connect with her father, leading to additional emotional strain. Liam considered it possible that Sarah's emotional state may have contributed to her disappearance. However, it was also clear that Sarah was planning a trip to Canada around that time and had recently exchanged money in preparation for her travels. Liam's testimony gained credibility when Canadian dollars were found in her bedside table drawer, though the amount was relatively insignificant. Preston Taylor, a close friend from high school, corroborated Liam's story. Preston mentioned that Sarah had struggled with depression, leading him to wonder if she had fled to Canada or taken her own life by jumping off a bridge. His emotional testimony underscored the strong bond he shared with Sarah. Despite these accounts, investigators soon ruled out the possibility of Sarah fleeing the country due to the absence of her passport. As a result, the search focused on the more distressing possibility of her having jumped to her death. A comprehensive search operation was launched along the river, involving divers, specialized equipment, and hundreds of volunteers, including police. However, strong currents posed a challenge, potentially carrying her remains or personal belongings far from the bridge, and thorough searches of both riverbanks were necessary to try to find any signs of Sarah. Among the volunteers searching for Sarah were her friends Liam and Preston. Despite their efforts, the search yielded nothing, prompting law enforcement to re-question those closest to Sarah. It was during this process that discrepancies in their accounts began to emerge. Sarah's friends and classmates described her as a happy and carefree person, with no signs of depression or problems with her father, whom she often spoke about affectionately. However, Liam and Preston's behavior after Sarah's disappearance raised eyebrows. They initially acted as if they had lost a loved one, gaining sympathy from many. But over time, their behavior seemed increasingly insincere, as if they were performing for an audience. The fact that Liam and Preston had only recently become close, about a month before Sarah's disappearance, raised suspicions and led the police to re-question them. Liam was visibly shaken when he was brought in for further questioning. The investigator asked him about his relationship with Sarah and Preston, and Liam explained that the three of them had grown up together on the same street and attended the same school. They were extremely close, sharing their deepest secrets and dreams with each other. Preston had even taken Sarah to prom, but they had never been romantically involved. Liam clarified that his relationship with Sarah was more than just friendship. He considered her like a sister. They had even listed each other as siblings on social media. Sarah had confided in Liam about her family, telling him that her mother had left her a significant amount of money in a safety deposit box at the bank. Sarah didn't trust her father, who claimed a right to the money, so she planned to retrieve it soon and move to Canada. However, when the investigator shared this information with Michael, Sarah's father, he provided a conflicting account. According to Michael, his wife had been saving money for Sarah's future since her birth, setting aside funds for education, a wedding, or a down payment on a house. The money had been stored at home in a shoe box, containing old and worn-out bills, but no one had thought much of it at the time. After Sarah's mother passed away, her father gave her a large sum of money, which he advised her to put in the bank. Sarah took his advice, dividing the money between her checking account for everyday expenses and a safe deposit box for the rest. She intended to use the money for graduate school and travel. Michael claimed he wasn't interested in the money for himself. When investigators discovered that Sarah had access to a significant amount of money, they began to suspect that her disappearance might be related to her finances. They decided to look into her financial transactions, including her bank account and safe deposit box. Their investigation revealed that Sarah had withdrawn a large amount of cash from an ATM just a few days before she disappeared, and had also accessed her safe deposit box at the bank around the same time. The detectives were in for another surprise when they reviewed the bank's surveillance footage, which showed that Sarah was not alone when she visited the bank on December 1st. Liam was with her, raising questions about why he hadn't mentioned this earlier. When asked about it, Liam explained that Sarah had confided in him about her banking activities and had asked for his accompaniment because she was nervous about carrying a large sum of cash. Liam's hesitation was evident, but his story seemed plausible, and his demeanor appeared genuine. Further investigation led to the discovery of a security camera in a neighboring house that had captured footage of the street and Sarah's yard. The footage confirmed that Liam had stayed at Sarah's house until 7 p.m., then left for work and didn't return. Meanwhile, the silver sedan was seen leaving the garage around 11 p.m. This new information added a chilling twist to the already disturbing case. In a surprising turn of events, an acquaintance of Sarah's named Anthony walked into the police station about a month after her disappearance. Unaware of the recent events, Anthony had been out of town for several weeks. He shared a peculiar story that sent shockwaves through the investigation. It turned out that Anthony had gone to school with Sarah, Liam, and Preston, and after graduation, he had pursued a passion for filmmaking, keeping in touch only with Liam, who also shared his interest in cinema. Anthony remembered that about a month and a half before Sarah disappeared, Liam visited him and they spent an evening brainstorming ideas for a horror movie aimed at teenagers. Liam came up with a plot about a girl who shares a secret about a large sum of money with her friend, who then gains her trust and kills her, dumping her body in a river. Anthony thought the idea was good, and they even wrote a few pages of the script. After that, Anthony moved on to another project and forgot about the story. He then left town to work on a film as a camera assistant. When he returned, Liam unexpectedly called him and asked if the police had contacted Anthony. Anthony was surprised and had not heard that Sarah was missing, so he decided to go to the police. After hearing a new witness's testimony, the police asked Anthony to try to get Liam to confess by drawing him into a conversation. Anthony agreed and a plan was set in motion. He would invite Liam to work on a project that required renting expensive camera equipment, which they would pretend they couldn't afford. Liam had ambitions of being in a movie, so the police thought he would likely jump at the chance to make his dream a reality, especially if it meant using the money he had taken from Sarah. They decided to test him by setting up a sting operation. Anthony, a friend of Liam's, was asked to pretend to have connections in the film industry and offer him a deal. Anthony met with Liam and suggested they discuss the details in person. Unbeknownst to Liam, a hidden camera had been installed in Anthony's car to capture any incriminating evidence. When Liam got into the car, he looked around nervously, as if he suspected something was off. He then handed Anthony an envelope containing $2,000 in cash and asked if it was enough to rent the equipment they would need for the movie. Anthony agreed, and then asked Liam where he had gotten the old bills. Liam hesitated before admitting that the money belonged to Sarah, and that he and his friend Preston had taken it from her house because, in his words, the dead don't need it. Although Liam didn't provide any further details, his admission was enough for the police to arrest him and his friend Preston on suspicion of a crime. Preston, Liam's accomplice, quickly began cooperating with the authorities and struck a deal with the prosecution. He told them that he hadn't directly participated in the crime, but had helped Liam cover his tracks and get rid of Sarah's body. According to Preston, Liam started plotting to take Sarah's money as soon as he found out about it. Sarah had kept her inheritance a secret, even from her closest friend, for a long time. However, when she began making serious plans for a trip to Canada, Liam asked her how she intended to pay for it, and she revealed that she had inherited a sum of money from her mother. Liam then persuaded her that it would be safer to store the money in a home safe rather than a bank vault, and he urged her to withdraw the cash. Liam, determined to carry out his plan, waited for the perfect opportunity while Sarah's father was away on a business trip. He enlisted the help of his friend Preston, promising him $25,000 in exchange for his assistance. Liam had Sarah withdraw a large sum of money from the ATM, but didn't check the exact amount. They spent the next day together, waiting for the right moment to strike. When the time came, Liam separated Sarah from her dog by locking it in another room, then approached Sarah from behind and attempted to strangle her. However, the crime proved more difficult than Liam anticipated. Sarah, being physically strong and athletic, resisted fiercely, resulting in an intense struggle until she eventually lost consciousness. But despite his best efforts, Liam was unable to determine whether she had truly succumbed. Sarah continued to show signs of life, leaving Liam to prolong his efforts to ensure her demise. This took nearly 30 minutes. Only when Liam was certain Sarah was dead did he leave her house, going about his normal routine by heading to work. He then had Preston follow up on his original instructions, no doubt aiming to ensure their sinister act would go unnoticed. Liam McAtasney snuck into Sarah's house through the back door, avoiding the camera's view, and dragged the body to the garage. He then cleaned up the room to remove any evidence. A couple of hours later, he returned to the house, took a small safe from Sarah's room, and placed the body in the car. Liam drove away carefully to avoid being caught on the neighbor's camera. He met Preston at a bridge, where they transferred the body to Preston's car and then disposed of it in a nearby river. After disposing of the body, they cleaned the car and drove back to Liam's house to divide the stolen money. However, they were disappointed to find only $110,000 in the safe. They decided to be cautious and not spend the old bills immediately to avoid raising suspicion. Preston buried the safe in a local park, and they only spent the money Sarah had withdrawn from her account. During the trial, Preston confessed to the crime, but Liam denied any involvement and tried to shift the blame to his friend. Liam's lawyer also claimed his client was innocent, suggesting that Preston acted alone. The case was complicated by the fact that Sarah's body was never found. When police searched Liam's house, they found a small key that fit the buried safe, which was identified by Preston as evidence of Liam's guilt. The trial of Liam McAtasney lasted over 2 years. Despite the fact that Sarah Stern's body was never found, the evidence presented in court proved McAtasney's guilt. This evidence included a script he had written months before the crime, a key to a safe found in his home, incriminating statements he made in the car, and old bills he had given to someone. Furthermore, fingerprints belonging to Liam and his accomplice, Preston Taylor, were found inside the safe. A co-worker of Liam's also testified that he had been absent from work for a few hours on the night of the crime and had asked someone to cover for him. As a result of the trial, Liam was sentenced to life in prison without the possibility of parole. Preston, who had not directly participated in the crime, received an 18-year sentence for obstructing justice and hindering the investigation. Preston will be eligible for parole in 15 years. Unfortunately, Sarah Stern's body has still not been found. Hello friends, welcome to our channel. Today we're going to take a look at another horrible case with you, the case of Jessie Bardwell. Jessie Bardwell was born on September 10, 1988, in Pascagoula, Mississippi, to loving parents Gary and Carla Bardwell. She had an older brother named Brandon. The siblings had a close relationship, with Brandon often protecting Jessie from bullies. Their childhood was filled with joy and love, thanks in part to frequent visits from their grandma Kitty, who adored her grandchildren. She would read to them, share stories, and invent games, creating a warm and nurturing environment. The Bardwell family embodied the quintessential American family spirit. Jessie was a kind, cheerful, and stylish girl who dreamed of a career in the beauty industry and one day opening her own salon. However, when Jessie was 14, her parents divorced, disrupting the family's harmony. She chose to live with her father, Gary, with whom she had a warm and trusting relationship. As a firefighter, Gary's job could be unpredictable, and Jessie would often call to check on him. Gary eventually married again, this time to Gina. Jessie developed a good relationship with her new stepmother. Gina proved to be an excellent homemaker, providing care and support to the entire family. Jessie was relieved to see her father happy with his partner, which made her feel secure about leaving home in the future. After completing her education, Jessie moved to Orange Beach, Alabama, to start her independent life. She worked as a waitress at Cobalt, a popular beachfront restaurant, to support herself. Her father, Gary, recalled how Jessie loved being near the water as it brought her peace. Despite the distance, they remained close, frequently exchanging messages and spending quality time together, such as going boating and fishing, whenever he visited. Kimberly Embry, the restaurant manager and Jessie's friend, discovered that Jessie's father was a skilled musician. After retiring, he dedicated more time to his craft, leading to frequent performances at the restaurant, where he even had his own table. Kimberly admired the close bond between Jessie and her father, describing them as true friends. Jessie always attended her father's performances, and the tips she earned helped fund her college education and pursue her dreams. At work, Jessie met a young man named Terry Ellis, who was also a waiter. They began dating and developed a steady and serious relationship, appearing to be a harmonious couple. However, at a social event, Jessie met Jason Lowe, a friend of Terry's, and was immediately smitten. Her sudden infatuation surprised everyone, and she fell deeply in love with Jason, becoming oblivious to her surroundings. Jessie and Terry parted ways amicably. Jessie opened up to him about her newfound feelings. This decision turned her life upside down, but she was drawn to Jason's charming and promising nature. He was handsome, held 2 degrees, and had a decent job. Jason was polite and knew how to present himself well. For Jessie, her new feelings marked the beginning of a new life. When Jason learned about her dreams, he promised to fulfill them. As he needed to relocate to Dallas, Texas, for a high-paying job in the technology industry, Jessie decided to follow him. Jessie viewed the move as an adventure, rather than a life-changing decision. Although she was hesitant to leave her father, Gary, for an extended period, her ambition and youthful idealism ultimately prevailed. She kept her plans a secret from her father, fearing his disappointment and knowing he would be opposed to her decision. As a result, she didn't inform him of her plans, even when they spent their last Christmas together. Mr. Bardwell didn't notice anything out of the ordinary about his daughter Jessie's behavior initially. She seemed happy, laughing and joking as usual. Jessie, 24, had moved to Richardson, a suburb of Dallas, with her boyfriend Jason. While Jason worked from home, Jessie was looking for a new job and scouting locations for her own salon. They had plans to get married and buy a house. However, Jessie's relationship with her father began to change drastically. They grew apart, and Jessie stopped answering her father's calls, which troubled Mr. Bardwell. It wasn't until speaking with Kimberly that Mr. Bardwell learned of Jessie's new boyfriend and her move out of state. He tried to reconnect with Jessie, but Jason controlled her communications. Mr. Bardwell's suspicions about Jason grew after meeting him when they visited Pascagoula. The father attempted to dissuade his daughter, Jessie, from returning to Texas, but she was resolute. When Gary inquired about her well-being, Jessie hugged him tightly, insisting everything was fine and expressing her desire to make her family proud. However, her father couldn't shake off the feeling that something was amiss. He even wrote a song, "Taken," in her honor. For months after Jessie moved to Texas, she ceased responding to phone calls. The final warning sign came on May 8th, when she failed to wish her mother and stepmother a happy Mother's Day, a cherished family tradition. Gary sensed something was terribly wrong and contacted Jason, Jessie's boyfriend. Jason claimed ignorance of Jessie's whereabouts, citing their supposedly open relationship, which allowed her to come and go as she pleased. However, Gary knew this was a lie, aware that Jason was a jealous and controlling partner who contradicted himself. The next morning, Jessie's father headed to Texas, convinced that her boyfriend was involved in her disappearance. During his journey, he sent the boyfriend a message warning him that if Jessie wasn't home when he arrived, there would be serious consequences. When he arrived at their apartment, he found no sign of Jessie or her belongings. Despite this, the boyfriend claimed he had no idea where she was and was waiting for her to return. Later, Kimberly shared some information that Jessie had confided in her during a rare heart-to-heart conversation. It turned out that Jason had been spending money on banned substances and entertainment, and his promises to fulfill Jessie's dreams had largely evaporated. The boyfriend had been pretending to be someone he wasn't, and this was also reflected in how he treated Jessie. While their relationship appeared fine in public, Jason was often rude and aggressive in private, leading to frequent conflicts. With Jessie missing, her father filed a missing person report with the Richardson police. The investigation was led by Detective Hiram Hale, a father of 3 daughters who was determined to uncover the truth. The police took immediate action, speaking with the boyfriend several times and searching the house, but they found no sign of Jessie. During the conversation, the young man, Jason, mentioned that he last saw Jessie on May 8 around 10 a.m. She left without explanation, and he thought she might be visiting her parents. He claimed that she drove away in her Acura car. Jason maintained that their relationship was casual and that he didn't control her or pry into her personal life. However, investigators discovered information that contradicted his statements. They found out that Jessie had sold her Acura car 3 weeks earlier, and Jason was present at the sale. This new information raised suspicions, and investigators questioned Jason again on May 12. When searching his home, police found a plate with a powder substance in the kitchen, which turned out to be cocaine. The investigation then shifted to Jason's garage and the vehicle inside. At first, Jason was unwilling to permit the search, stating that he shared the garage with others and therefore required their consent. However, he eventually dropped his objections. Upon entering the garage, officers noticed a mud-splattered Audi with a detached bumper. They suspected that Jesse's body might be inside the car. Although the vehicle was empty, the smell of decomposition was stronger inside. Police found the broken bumper and what appeared to be blood stains in the trunk. When experts applied a luminol-based substance to the cargo area, it illuminated with a blue light, indicating the presence of blood, likely belonging to the missing woman. Jason claimed he became stuck in the mud while searching for his girlfriend after the car's bumper caught on a bush. Despite this, he maintained that he had no knowledge of her whereabouts. However, he was unable to explain the presence of blood in the car or the controlled substances found in his home. Experts determined that the amount of blood in the trunk suggested that she was likely deceased. As a result, the case was reclassified as a homicide investigation. To prevent the main suspect from fleeing, Jason was detained on charges related to the narcotics found in his home. During interrogation, Jason continued to stick to his story. When shown a photo of his loved one, he refused to provide any explanations, gazing at the picture without emotion and suggesting that he was being framed for a crime he did not commit. Eventually, the suspect was charged with homicide, even though Jesse's body had not been found. The search for her continued, but it was a difficult and time-consuming process in the vast state of Texas, with its many rivers, lakes, fields, and forests, where a body could easily be hidden. 1 year later, Jason was in a Texas jail, still cooperating with the investigation. He revealed 2 key details about the case. Firstly, he claimed Jesse's death was an accident and planned to reveal more in court, hoping the jury would be understanding. This makes it difficult for prosecutors to build a case. Andy Farkas, Jason's defense attorney, is very happy about this. Farkas conducted a mock trial with a panel of outsiders acting as jurors, using the available evidence and Jason's confession. However, the mock trial ended in a not guilty verdict, with 15 out of the mock jurors voting to acquit. Farkas hoped that a real court would also deliver a not guilty verdict if they knew the truth. It was later revealed that Jason himself had provided the anonymous tip about the location of the victim's body, which became another piece of evidence in the investigation. The prosecution proposed a deal to reduce the sentence by half if Jason revealed Jesse's location. After discussing it with his lawyer, Jason agreed, on the condition that the source of the information would remain secret until the trial. The authorities wanted to find Jesse's body so her family could give her a proper burial and say their goodbyes. As time passed, Jesse's father, Gary, became consumed by grief and anger, longing for justice to be served. On May 19th, when Jesse's body was finally discovered, her loved ones were able to mourn her and say goodbye. However, when Gary received the autopsy report, he was shocked and appalled by the state of his daughter's body. She had been wrapped in a sheet and was barely recognizable as a human being, having been discarded like trash. Gary arranged for his daughter's body to be returned to her hometown with the help of his friends and former colleagues, who hired a funeral hearse to transport her. Jesse's family, friends, and acquaintances held a memorial service for her on the beach, where they prayed for her to be found and for justice for her suffering. About 1,000 people attended a memorial service at the First United Methodist Church to honor the victim. The victim's grandmother, Kitty Bardwell, spoke emotionally, saying that if the town could be cleansed by the tears shed for her granddaughter, it would be truly clean. The tragedy drew widespread attention, with many offering condolences to the family and coming forward to support them. Gary found a unique way to cope with his emotions. Gary printed a photo of Jason, attached it to a stump, and hit it with a 12-pound sledgehammer. This unusual form of therapy brought him some small sense of relief. However, Gary continued to struggle, often finding it hard to get out of bed in the morning. He held on to the hope that Jason would be tried and convicted for murdering his daughter. Gary blamed himself for not doing more to protect Jessie, wishing he had convinced her to leave Jason or at least break up with him. Gary remembered a phone call from Jessie, where she admitted he was right about Jason after they had argued and he had kicked her out. She had found temporary shelter with a friend but returned to Jason the next day, giving him another chance. Gary had no choice but to accept his daughter's decision, a choice that would later fill him with regret. When the trial finally began, Gary traveled to Texas, determined to see Jason punished for his crime. Prosecutor Cynthia Walker started her opening statement by describing Jason's personality. Many people saw him as complex and difficult to get along with, and he had few friends because of his long history of substance abuse, which often led to uncontrollable outbursts of anger. It's possible that Jesse was a victim of one of these outbursts. Prosecutor Westwin called some of Jason's former girlfriends to testify. They supported the prosecution's claims about Jason's aggressive behavior, saying they had feared for their lives because of his violent jealousy. Like Jesse, they had been isolated from their friends and family by Jason, who showed clear signs of being manipulative and a pathological liar. In contrast, Jason presented himself as superior to other men, successfully deceiving people. Jason responded quickly to these revelations in court. He said he had started using substances at age 13, influenced by his friends, and had become addicted. Jason Lowe tried to keep his life on track, earning multiple degrees and working for a prestigious global company. He claimed his actions were motivated by a desire to fulfill Jesse's dreams and build a life together out of love. However, the prosecution presented a different image of Jason. They suggested that his behavior was inconsistent with someone grieving the loss of a loved one. The investigation found that Jesse's death occurred between May 1st and May 3rd, likely on the day of a reported argument with Jason that the neighbors, the Jordans, witnessed. After Jesse's death, Jason moved her body to the garage and placed it in the trunk of his car, where it remained for several days. The blood found in the car was confirmed to be Jesse's. Jason later moved her body to a remote farm, hiding it in the nearby woods. The sheet wrapping Jesse's body was identified as part of Jason's bedding set, which was still in use at his home even after her death. Meanwhile, Jason continued to see other women, exchanging messages and intimate photos with them before meeting at his apartment. Jason tried to cope with his emotions by using substances, which he believed made dealing with reality easier. However, his attempt to distract himself was disrupted when detectives discovered his involvement in Jesse's death through a clever tactic. They asked Tommy Jordan, someone Jason knew, to talk to him while being monitored. During this conversation, Jason admitted to making a mistake and feeling guilty about an accident that happened with Jesse, which he attributed to his own negligence. Jason's admission was seen as a confession, and he eventually told the prosecution where Jesse's body was located. At the trial, Jason shared his account of what happened on the night of Jesse's death. He explained that they had taken pills that increased their libido and were intimate in the shower. Jason slipped and fell, followed by Jesse, who hit her head on the bathtub. She then sat down, feeling hot and dizzy, and Jason claimed he offered to call for medical help, but Jesse refused, thinking that rest and sleep would be enough. Jason found Jesse unresponsive and not breathing on his chest the next morning. Despite trying to revive her, she was dead. Afraid of being accused of murder, Jason didn't call the police and instead decided to handle the situation himself. He initially left Jesse's body in his car, but later moved it to a remote farm where he carelessly discarded her in a trash pile without a proper burial. However, Jason's story was questionable due to his questionable character and the results of the forensic medical examination. The examination revealed that Jesse had suffered severe head injuries that couldn't have been caused by slaps to the face, suggesting that Jason had tried to cover up evidence of a violent beating. As a result, Jason's entire story was discredited. After deliberating for 6 hours, the jury found him guilty. Judge Scott Becker sentenced Jason to 50 years in prison. Jason's original sentence could have been up to 99 years, but it was reduced due to a deal with the prosecution. As a result, Jason won't be eligible for parole until at least 2041. Gary felt a sense of relief when the verdict was announced, feeling that justice had been served. However, he noticed that Jason showed no remorse for his actions. Interestingly, Jason's ex-girlfriends, including Chrissy Chambers, were present at the trial, with Chambers commenting that if she could give one piece of advice to others in similar situations, it would be to get away as soon as possible. Jason continues to claim that the death was an accident and maintains his innocence to this day. Sadly, Jason's girlfriend, Jessie, had already paid the ultimate price. Jessie grew up with a positive example of male behavior, courtesy of her father Gary, but tragically discovered Jason's darker side too late. This experience serves as a warning that some men can be deceiving, manipulative, hiding behind a charming exterior. Hello friends, welcome to our channel. Today we're going to take a look at another horrible case with you, the case of Lindsay Cutshall. Lindsay Cutshall was born in 1982 in the small town of White Eyes, Ohio, to a devoutly Christian family. Her father was a pastor, and she was raised with strong religious values. Despite her strict upbringing, Lindsay was an adventurous and active child who enjoyed sports and later developed a passion for hiking and extreme tourism. After completing her education, Lindsay attended Appalachian Bible College in West Virginia, where she honed her outdoor skills. She regularly went on hikes, climbed mountains, and rafted down rivers, often organizing her own expeditions. Lindsay's dream was to establish a summer camp for children and teenagers, where she could teach them wilderness survival skills, rafting, and other outdoor activities. Jason Allen was born in 1978 in Zeeland, Michigan, to a deeply religious family. As a teenager, he became fascinated with hiking and wilderness survival. Jason was a tall, athletic, and charismatic individual who possessed natural leadership qualities, which drew like-minded people to him. He was passionate about exploring new heights and mastering outdoor skills. Lindsay and Jason met in 2002 during a hiking trip in the Appalachian Mountains. At the time, Lindsay was still a student, while Jason worked as a mountain guide and climbing instructor. They quickly formed a connection after meeting for the first time, leading the young man to ask for her hand in marriage just 6 months later. Both sets of parents gave their approval, and the young man proposed to his girlfriend with a beautiful diamond ring. Shortly after, he gave her a second engagement ring. As a couple, they made ambitious plans for their future. They intended to get married in September 2004 and buy a spacious house to raise a family. But things didn't turn out as expected. Before their wedding, they worked as senior counselors at a Christian summer camp called Rock and Water in California's El Dorado County. Their goal was to gain experience and eventually open their own camp after the wedding. On the Friday evening of August 14th, Lindsay and Jason decided to take a weekend trip to the San Francisco area. Before leaving, they informed their colleagues of their plans and left 2 experienced counselors in charge of the camp, ensuring a smooth transition. They told everyone they would return by Monday, expecting no issues for either themselves or their temporary replacements. With their plan in place, they set off in Lindsay's 1992 red Ford Tempo, and unfortunately, this was the last time anyone saw them alive. By Sunday evening, Jason and Lindsay, both counselors, had not returned to camp, but their absence did not raise immediate concern. It was assumed they would arrive late that night or early Monday. However, when they failed to appear at the Monday morning roll call at 8 a.m. and their phones were unreachable, their colleagues grew worried. The group quickly notified the police and then reached out to Jason and Lindsay's families to inform them about the situation. The parents went to the camp right away to get more information about the incident. Their colleagues were particularly concerned because Jason and Lindsay were known for their reliability and punctuality. If they had encountered any issues, they would have likely found a way to communicate. Upon arriving at the camp, law enforcement officials began questioning their colleagues, but the investigation quickly hit a roadblock. no one knew exactly where Jason and Lindsay had gone. They had planned to explore the San Francisco area, but their love for adventure and extreme activities made it likely that they were in a remote location with no access to communication or civilization. The police decided to wait for 48 hours, allowing the missing couple a window to possibly return home by themselves. In the meantime, concerned relatives and friends didn't want to delay any longer, and therefore decided to start searching. They reached out to everyone in their network, trying to gather information about the last time someone had contact with they. A missing person flyer featuring a photo of they was circulated, asking witnesses to report any potential sightings right away. By Tuesday, law enforcement had joined the search. The main focus was on the San Francisco area, its surrounding suburbs, and nearby localities. However, the large terrain made it challenging to thoroughly search every inch. A friend's insight that they frequently visited the secluded and picturesque rocky beaches led the police to concentrate on these locations. As the search effort dragged on for days, with several bodies found in sleeping bags in the targeted areas, the likelihood of finding they alive decreased significantly. On Wednesday, August 19th, a helicopter patrol spotted 2 bodies in sleeping bags on a remote rocky beach, indicating that the individuals were likely deceased rather than just resting. Upon arriving at the scene, police found a red Ford Tempo parked near a tourist shelter and a steep trail leading to a scenic beach. The car was identified as belonging to missing student Lindsay Cutshall after a database check. As officers descended the trail, they discovered 2 people in sleeping bags, who initially appeared to be sleeping. However, they did not respond to calls or noise. Closer inspection revealed that the individuals, a young man and woman, were deceased, with no signs of life. Preliminary examination suggested that they had been killed by gunshot wounds to the head, and the smell of decomposition indicated they had been there for over a day. All of their belongings, including phones, wallets, bank cards, and cash, were found next to them, ruling out robbery as a motive. The car keys were also visible, eliminating car theft as a motive. Investigators initially believed the deceased were the young couple who had gone missing near San Francisco the previous week. Documents found at the scene confirmed the identities of the victims as Lindsay Cutshall and Jason Allen. However, formal identification by their relatives was still necessary. When the parents arrived, they were overcome with grief upon recognizing the bodies of their children. The investigation led police to rule out initial theories of robbery or carjacking due to the presence of untouched valuables, money, and keys at the scene. Forensic analysis also showed no signs of physical or intimate assault on the bodies, except for the fatal gunshot wounds to the head. It appeared that Lindsay and Jason were peacefully sleeping and did not have time to react to the attack. They showed no signs of trying to defend themselves, escape, or even get out of their sleeping bags, indicating a sudden and deliberate act that was similar to an execution or a revenge killing. The brutal murder of 2 individuals on a secluded beach left investigators with many questions but no clear answers. The beach was difficult to access, and there were no signs of anyone else being in the area. Despite a thorough search, no shell casings were found, leading investigators to believe that the shooter may have taken them or thrown them into the ocean. The fact that the shots were fired at close range into the victim's head suggested that the casings should have been nearby if they hadn't been deliberately moved. A search of the area revealed an empty beer bottle a few meters from the crime scene. This was notable because Lindsay and Jason did not drink alcohol and led a healthy lifestyle, suggesting that the bottle may have belonged to the shooter. The brand of beer was unusual for the area and was more commonly found in a neighboring state. Although it was unclear whether the bottle was connected to the crime, it was considered a significant lead in the investigation. A theory emerged that Lindsay and Jason may have had a confrontation with someone the day before their deaths, and this person may have returned at night with a gun to settle the dispute. Although Jason and Lindsay were known for being friendly, it was possible they may have unknowingly offended someone. Additionally, the shooter may have been intoxicated or mentally unstable. Examination of the bullets found in the victim's skulls showed they came from a rare Marlin rifle, specifically a .45 caliber Model 18, produced in 1994 by Marlin Firearms Company. This type of rifle was typically used for hunting and was often part of a collector's arsenal. This discovery was a significant lead in the investigation, but it remained the only concrete clue at the time. Investigations suggested that the shooter was likely a lone male. He may have been a hunter, collector, or gun enthusiast. To further the investigation, authorities aimed to reconstruct their final route, identify who they may have contacted, and determine when they were last seen alive. Fortunately, they had taken many photos, and their camera was found intact among their belongings, which provided a useful starting point for tracking their movements. A guest book at a tourist cabin near the lookout point, where they had parked their car, contained entries expressing their delight with the weekend getaway. They had also visited a fishing pier about 20 miles away on Saturday, as evidenced by the photographs they took. Police officers returned to the pier and interviewed locals to find people who may have seen something significant. Several people remembered a young couple in a red car who inquired about overnight accommodations but found all 3 nearby hotels fully booked due to peak tourist season. They had dinner at a local restaurant, walked around the area, and took photos before leaving in the evening. According to those who saw and interacted with them, they was friendly, did not engage in any conflicts, and seemed carefree and happy. However, none of the witnesses could recall anything unusual or suspicious. The location where the bodies were found was a protected area, closed to camping. However, the young couple had nowhere else to stay overnight, so they decided to camp on the beach, using sleeping bags instead of a tent. They felt safe on the secluded beach on a warm August night and planned to return to the Rock and Water Camp on Sunday. This information helped investigators narrow down the time frame of their deaths. Since they went to sleep but didn't survive until morning, it's likely they were killed between 11 p.m. on Saturday and dawn on Sunday. Despite the ongoing investigation and public appeals for information, police withheld certain details, including the results of the ballistics analysis. This action was taken to prevent the suspect from being tipped off and getting rid of the murder weapon before the investigation could start. The investigation first focused on a local homeless man who was known to sleep on the beach where the crime occurred. He was found and questioned by police, but despite not having an alibi for the night of the crime, he was not confirmed to be involved. The main reasons for this were that the murder weapon was never found and his DNA did not match the DNA found on a beer bottle discovered at the crime scene. The case went cold for nearly 2 years, but in the spring of 2006, police decided to release more information about the crime, including details about the weapon used. They also offered a $50,000 reward for any information that could help identify the perpetrator and solve the case. Following the public appeal, authorities received over 1,000 calls, but only a few were useful for the investigation. One individual, 26 years old Sean Gallen, drew particular attention from several locals who described him as an aggressive collector of firearms and blades. He was reportedly prone to conflicts, had a history of property damage, and frequently threatened violent behavior. The police investigated Sean Gallen and questioned him because they already knew him from previous incidents involving fights and drunk driving. Upon inspecting his possessions, Sean did possess numerous weapons but did not own the rifle in question. Authorities were unable to verify his whereabouts around the time of the crime due to the year gap, and his DNA did not match the sample found on the beer bottle at the crime scene, forcing his release. Meanwhile, international authorities were investigating another individual, 61 years old Joseph Henry Burgess, who made locals nervous due to his tendency to carry firearms and exhibit aggressive behavior. Burgess was described as erratic, often claiming he received orders from God, sparking suspicion that he could be the perpetrator. Joseph Burgess was living in Canada in the late 1970s, feeling lost and without a clear sense of purpose or direction in his life. In 1978, he joined the Children of God commune, presenting himself as a deeply devoted individual. Those around him considered him excessively zealous. A rivalry with two young members escalated into hostility, and shortly after, both individuals were found dead with multiple close-range gunshot wounds to the head. The circumstances of their deaths were particularly notable. Their bodies were discovered in sleeping bags on a beach, suggesting they were shot while asleep. By the time the authorities arrived, Joseph had disappeared. Although evidence left behind implicated him in the crime, he had already fled to the United States, crossing the border illegally. Joseph managed to evade capture for nearly 25 years until the police linked him to a double homicide in California. However, the opportunity to question him was lost when a shootout occurred during his arrest, resulting in the deaths of both a police sergeant and Joseph, who initiated the gunfire. This ultimately unresolved case remains shrouded in mystery. A 35-year-old man named Seamus Gallen was killed by his younger brother, Sean Gallen. The brothers had gotten into an argument, during which Sean, who was under the influence of illicit substances, shot Seamus 3 times with a gun. Sean had a history with the police, having been previously investigated for a double murder on a beach, but was released due to lack of evidence. Since then, Sean had been in trouble with the law twice for causing property damage and making threats, but only received fines. It was also discovered that Sean was an avid hunter and enjoyed making knives and other bladed weapons. People who knew him described him as antisocial, aggressive, and unpredictable. After killing his brother, Sean tried to run away but was caught almost immediately. The police decided to take another look at Sean's possible involvement in a crime that happened 13 years ago. They found useful information on his social media page, where he had posted pictures of his large collection of weapons and talked about his supposed psychic abilities. According to his posts, Sean believed he was on a special mission and was receiving instructions from outer space. Sean's behavior initially led police to suspect that he had serious mental health issues. He refused to cooperate with the investigation, spoke incoherently, and maintained his innocence. A new lead was found by investigators who examined private messages on the deceased brother's social media page, something no one anticipated. In 2006, a $50,000 reward had been offered for information about a double homicide case. Sean's former girlfriend had messaged his brother, suggesting that she could claim the reward by turning Sean in. It appeared that both the girlfriend and the brother had knowledge about the case, but they had chosen to remain silent. Unfortunately, it was no longer possible to question either of them, as the brother had been shot and the girlfriend had died in a car accident 2 years earlier. However, when Sean was shown the printouts of the messages between his former girlfriend and his brother, he made a shocking confession. Despite his initial denials, Sean began to provide a detailed account of the events surrounding the double homicide. His recollection of the details was vivid, even though more than 13 years had passed since the crime occurred. One evening, a man left his house with a Marlin rifle, planning to hunt in a nearby wooded area. However, after wandering aimlessly for a couple of hours, he decided to head down to a nearby beach, which he believed was a good spot to find wild boars. As he walked along the shore, he came across 2 sleeping bags with a young man and woman asleep inside. He stood there watching them for several minutes, when suddenly he heard voices in his head telling him to kill them. The man claimed that this was a mission from outer space that he had to carry out. So, he pointed his rifle directly at the young man's head and fired, instantly killing him. The sound of the shot woke she, but before she could even process what was happening, the man fired again, killing her as well. He then picked up the spent casings and put them in an empty beer can he had been carrying. Later, he threw the can into some bushes in his father's backyard, where he also hid the rifle, asking his father to keep it for him. Sean's father hid the murder weapon in the cellar of his old barn without asking any questions. Remarkably, Sean's account of the crime was later confirmed. When the barn eventually collapsed, the rifle was discovered at the site, and a beer can with shell casings was still hidden in the overgrown bushes in the backyard. The property's abandonment after Sean's father passed away in 2009 had helped preserve these key pieces of evidence. A beer bottle found on the beach was initially considered evidence, but it was later discovered to be unrelated to the crime. Sean claimed that voices in his head ordered him to commit violent acts and that he was not aware of his actions when he committed the crime. His defense argued that Sean was mentally ill and unfit to stand trial. The court relied on expert psychiatrists to assess the validity of these claims. The psychiatric evaluation found that Sean did indeed suffer from multiple mental health disorders, which were exacerbated by his use of alcohol and prohibited substances. However, the evaluation also showed that at the time of the crime, Sean acted with deliberation and careful planning, fully aware of his actions and the need to cover his tracks to avoid detection. Specifically, Sean deliberately killed the young man first, knowing that she would be less able to resist or defend herself if anything went wrong. Sean carefully removed the casings and handed the rifle to his father, instructing him to conceal it. Although psychiatrists diagnosed Sean with mental issues, they concluded he was mentally fit to stand trial and be held accountable for his actions. Notably, his family and former girlfriend were aware of or suspected his involvement in the double homicide, yet none of them reported him to the police. Sean's trial took place in the spring of 2019, nearly 15 years after the double homicide. On June 17, 2019, he was sentenced to 2 consecutive life terms without parole, plus an additional 94 years for killing his brother in 2017. He is currently serving his sentence in a special prison unit for inmates with mental disorders. Due to his continued claims of hearing voices and aggressive behavior, he is closely monitored to prevent harm to himself or others. The motive behind the double homicide was never established. According to reports, Sean randomly encountered they sleeping on the beach and decided to end their lives without apparent reason. Hello friends, welcome to our channel. Today we're going to take a look at another horrible case with you. The case of Lily James. Lily was born in the coastal town of Sainsbury, New South Wales, Australia in May 2002. She was the first child of the close-knit James family and was especially loved by her maternal grandmother, Barbara. Growing up, Lily spent much of her time by the ocean with her younger brother Max, where she developed a passion for swimming and an active lifestyle. Her father, a water polo coach at an Anglican girls' school in Hodgkin, encouraged her interest in the sport. Those who knew Lily remembered her as a friendly and outgoing person who excelled in her studies and was always willing to help those in need. Her well-rounded personality made her a standout student, and she was widely respected by her peers. With her impressive talent and dedication, Lily succeeded in multiple areas, including academia, sports, and community service. She was also an accomplished performer, participating in her school's theater and dance club. Eventually, Lily's talents caught the attention of organizers from the prestigious Woodford Folk Festival, one of Australia's largest annual events, attracting over 125,000 attendees from around the world. As part of the celebrations, Lily performed a unique monologue from William Shakespeare's Macbeth. Her performance showcased her impressive skills, charisma, and stage presence, earning her a standing ovation and the jury's approval. She achieved second place in the theater category, a remarkable achievement that earned her recognition and a significant prize. In 2018, Lily achieved another milestone when she passed her beginner's driving test. Her athletic talents also flourished, particularly in water polo, a sport she began competing in professionally, following in her father's footsteps. She won the title of swimming champion in the under-17 category, a feat that delighted her parents. By her final year of school, Lily had decided to pursue a career in sports, and in 2020, she enrolled at Sydney Technological University to study sports business management. A turning point in her life. In early 2021, she started a new chapter. To break up her college routine and gain teaching experience, she took a job as a water polo coach at St. Andrew's Cathedral School. Her youthful energy, vibrant personality, and passion for sports quickly won over her colleagues, the school administration, and the students she was coaching. The students looked up to her and tried to meet her high standards. In return, she sought to understand each student's unique needs and strengths. That's when she met Paul, the new cricket and hockey coach. His impressive skills and charismatic presence quickly made him the center of attention. As a part-time teacher at another school and a member of the University of New South Wales hockey team, Paul was a driven and accomplished young man. He was particularly popular among the female students and staff. However, opinions about him were divided. Some saw him as arrogant and stubborn, while others appreciated his positive qualities. Initially, Lily and Paul's interactions were friendly but brief, limited to exchanging greetings. Over time, their relationship evolved into something more. Lily's friends reported that Paul asked her out on a date, and she found it difficult to say no due to his charming smile. The date had a profound impact on both of them, leading to a decision to meet again. As Lily got to know Paul better, she began to develop feelings for him, unaware of his true nature. Her kindness and openness made her vulnerable to falling in love. Paul appeared to return her affection, frequently complimenting her, giving her flowers, and planning evenings together. They decided to keep their relationship a secret, especially from the students at school. Lily and her boyfriend, Paul, had agreed to keep their relationship private, adhering to the school's policy and Lily's personal preference for discretion. However, as time passed, rumors about their relationship began to circulate, evolving from hushed whispers to open discussions. When Lily discovered that Paul was the one who had revealed their relationship, she felt deeply hurt and betrayed. Paul's portrayal of her had also led to criticism and judgment from others, causing Lily to feel humiliated. As a result, she confronted Paul about his actions and ended their relationship. Despite Paul's subsequent attempts to apologize and reconcile, Lily remained resolute in her decision. She took some comfort in the fact that their relationship had been brief, allowing her to see Paul's true nature before things escalated further. Paul was born in 1999 in the Netherlands to a wealthy and influential family. When his father's job required a relocation to Australia in 2015, Paul and his family made the move. As an only child, Paul received excessive attention and care from his parents, which significantly contributed to his character development. Unfortunately, this upbringing led to Paul growing up with an entitled and self-centered attitude. Paul was a high-achieving student who excelled academically, athletically, and was physically fit. After moving to a new location, he attended St. Andrew's Cathedral School, where he joined the cricket team and quickly gained recognition and respect from his peers for his exceptional skills. He eventually became the team captain and actively participated in organizing extracurricular activities and festivals. While he was well-liked by many, particularly they who found him charming, some of his male peers were put off by his confidence and boasts about his ability to win over any girl. Despite this, Paul's charm and charisma earned him many admirers. After graduating in 2017, the school administration offered him a position as an assistant coach for cricket and hockey, which he gladly accepted. He quickly took on a leadership role and successfully managed these sections, feeling confident in his abilities. However, by early 2018, he surprisingly resigned and returned home with his family, citing unknown reasons for his departure. Back home, Paul decided to further his education and earned a master's degree in sports management. Paul had a conversation with old friends and mentioned that he had improved his coaching skills, which led to a job offer from his former employer. He returned to Australia and started working at the familiar school in early 2020. To reduce living expenses, Paul agreed to share an apartment with a friend in Kensington, a suburb of Sydney. Initially, they enjoyed each other's company, socializing after work. However, a few months later, they had a disagreement, and Paul decided to live alone. His parents, who he couldn't visit due to the pandemic, felt that Paul was lonely despite being busy and surrounded by people. They weren't aware of any romantic relationships in his life. By the summer of 2021, as Paul resumed his regular activities, people began to notice a change in his behavior and personality. He picked up where he left off in the sports world, regaining his status as a key player on the hockey team and continuing his active lifestyle, even featuring in promotional advertisements. At the same time, those who knew him observed emerging characteristics that were not present before. Uncontrollable outbursts of anger became a concern. Furthermore, rumors circulated within the school community about his unusual interest in his female students. He would often engage in flirtatious behavior with teenage girls, staring at them for extended periods, leaving them visibly uncomfortable and embarrassed. Paul's importance in the hockey team's progress to the Australian Hockey League finals was evident despite the turmoil in his personal life. His recent breakup with Lily was likely a significant blow to his ego. Unexpected, on October 26, 2023, at approximately 4:30 a.m., the principal of St. Andrew's Cathedral School in central Sydney sent an email to students and parents announcing the school's closure until the end of the week due to a critical incident. A tragedy occurred at the school, prompting a thorough investigation. On Thursday and Friday, a 24-hour consultation center was established in the school library to support those affected. Forensic teams meticulously searched the school building and surrounding area, gathering evidence. The gym was closed off, and the adjacent shower area was scheduled for demolition due to the disturbing discovery made there. The incident began to unfold when the body of a 20-year-old woman was found in the shower around midnight. She had been seen alive just hours earlier. The water polo coach had entered the shower but never emerged. Surveillance footage revealed that someone had followed her around 8 p.m., but the pursuer left the area alone, heading towards the school exit. A family member was later asked to identify the body due to severe facial damage. The victim was identified as Lily James. As the police delved deeper into the case, surveillance footage played a crucial role, and the prime suspect, a young man, was caught on camera multiple times. Investigations were launched into Paul and Lily's cell phone records, helping police track the suspect's last known location using GPS. They also sought to recover the victim's phone, hoping to uncover evidence through text messages that could shed light on the events leading up to the crime. After successfully locating the devices, the police reconstructed the sequence of events, revealing that Paul had purchased a hammer from a hardware store just days before the crime. It seemed he was consumed by anger toward the victim and had planned a confrontation. On the morning of October 25th, Lily followed her routine, attending the university and then heading to her job in the afternoon. Unbeknownst to her, her ex-boyfriend had other plans. Paul rented a silver Lexus and drove to the school, avoiding the building since he had no classes scheduled. He waited in the car, patiently biding his time. Once the students cleared out, he walked into the gym, concealing a hammer under his jacket to avoid drawing attention. From this vantage point, Paul observed Lily's movements, lying in wait for the perfect moment to strike. When Lily finished her training session and decided to take a shower, Paul saw his chance and followed her. An argument erupted, and in the heat of the moment, Paul attacked Lily, striking her head with the hammer. According to the pathologists, the impact was fatal, and Lily died instantly, without suffering. After waiting for an hour, Paul collected Lily's belongings and left the building. He then drove to Diamond Bay, where he disposed of the weapon in a trash can. Security cameras captured footage of him at the reserve at 8:47 p.m. His last known location, as tracked by investigators, was the Gap, a cliff in the eastern Sydney suburb of Vaucluse. As the community was still reeling from the initial tragedy, another shocking event occurred. On October 27, at 8 a.m., shopkeepers at Diamond Bay Reserve in Sydney's eastern suburbs made a disturbing discovery. A man's body was found just 11 miles away from the site of the first crime. A rescue team, including a bomb squad and Marine Corps personnel, was formed to retrieve the body. The body was recovered at 3:30 p.m. and taken for identification. Due to severe injuries, fingerprints were used to identify the individual. The victim was 24-year-old Paul, the same person who had been at the scene of the first crime. The investigation team faced a significant challenge in establishing a connection between the fatal incidents and uncovering the circumstances surrounding the events. The Gap is a notorious location with a history of suicides. Around 10 p.m., Paul used Lily's phone to send a message to her father, possibly revealing the location of her body. An hour later, the young man made a brief emergency call, but hung up quickly. When police arrived at the cliff, they found the personal belongings of Lily and Paul, but there was no sign of him. A rented car was parked nearby, suggesting that he may have taken his own life due to feelings of guilt or fear of facing the consequences of his actions. On October 26, police launched a search operation for his body, using helicopters and boats to scour the coastline. The first day's efforts were unsuccessful, but the next day, a body was found on rocks in a nearby nature reserve. With Paul deceased, the case was closed, and his parents collected his body, opting to cremate it in Sydney. A meeting was subsequently arranged with Tim Watson-Monro, a renowned forensic psychologist with extensive experience in analyzing the behavior of both criminals and victims. Mr. Watson-Monro was asked to share his insights on the incident and analyze the behavior of the perpetrator, Paul. According to Mr. Watson-Monro, Paul's actions were characteristic of individuals with an inflated sense of self-importance who struggle to accept rejection. He believed that Paul committed the crime in a premeditated and calculating manner, showing no remorse for his actions. When asked about Paul's decision to end his own life, Mr. Watson-Monro provided an explanation. Mr. Watson portrays Paul as a self-centered individual with psychopathic traits. Some have compared the tragic events to the finale of Romeo and Juliet, but the story of Lily and Paul is unique and unfolds in a distinct way. A genuine love relationship cannot thrive with pride, dishonesty, and betrayal. Unfortunately, Paul failed to grasp this, leading him to overlook the value of the person beside him. His decision to prioritize his own wounded ego ultimately resulted in the loss of a bright and vibrant life. This not only caused lasting pain for Lily's family but also for Paul's own loved ones. Regrettably, his actions left a devastating impact on those around him. Welcome back. We've got another mysterious case to explore. The case of Tanya McKinley. Tanya McKinley was born on January 25, 1961, in the small town of Milton, Florida. She grew up in a loving family and was very close to her older sister. After graduating from high school, Tanya decided to move to Pensacola, a town about 25 miles away from her hometown. She pursued a career in the medical field. Tanya moved to a new city with her cousin Vanita, and they shared an apartment. After moving in, Tanya met a man named James, and they began dating. They eventually moved in together and had a son, Timothy, in 1983. Although Tanya was happy to be a mother, her relationship with James was troubled. They argued frequently, and about a year after their son was born, they decided to go their separate ways. By the end of 1984, Tanya was temporarily living with Vanita, who was now married with 2 children. Tanya planned to find her own place as soon as possible. On New Year's Eve, Tanya, Vanita, and her husband decided to celebrate at a local bar. They left their children at a late-night daycare. Around midnight, Vanita and her husband were getting ready to leave, but Tanya wanted to stay a little longer. Since the daycare closed at 1 a.m., Vanita agreed to pick up Tanya's son, allowing Tanya to stay at the bar. Before leaving, Vanita asked Tanya how she planned to get home, since they had driven there together. Tanya replied that she would get a ride from their acquaintance at the bar. However, when Vanita woke up on January 1st, she found that Tanya had not yet returned home. At first, Vanita thought Tanya might have slept over with a friend, so she was not too worried. Then, Vanita's mother-in-law arrived with heartbreaking news. Tanya had been found dead around 3 a.m. A Pensacola resident was on her way to the vet with her daughter. While driving, her daughter pointed out a person on the side of the road. Pensacola thought it might be a mannequin, but when she got out to check, she discovered it was a human body. Pensacola immediately returned home and called the police. Upon arriving at the scene, officers found the body of a woman lying in an empty lot beside the road. She had no shoes, her tights were down, and her dress was pulled up. Near the body, a blue towel with what appeared to be bloodstains was found. The police identified the victim as 23-year-old Tanya McKinley. Further investigation led them to discover her shoes and purse nearby, containing identification with her name on it. The body was turned over to medical experts for further examination. Meanwhile, police continued to process the crime scene. They soon discovered that Tanya likely did not die where she was found. There was no significant blood near the body, except for a stain on a towel, and signs on the ground suggested that the body had been dragged to the side of the road. On the towel and Tanya's body, investigators found several clues, including dog hair and a human hair. They suspected that the hair belonged to the killer, and that the killer may have owned a dog. Medical experts determined that the Tanya had suffered a head injury from a heavy object, but her cause of death was actually strangulation. They also confirmed that the Tanya had been sexually assaulted. A semen sample was collected from her body, but at the time, DNA analysis was not yet widely used in forensic science. However, the experts were able to establish that the suspect had type B blood. Police began to develop a list of potential suspects. Police turned their attention to Tanya's ex-husband, James. After talking to Tanya's family and friends, police discovered that James and Tanya had argued frequently before and after the birth of their son. When Tanya decided to end the relationship, James was unhappy and tried to convince her to stay. Police believe that James followed Tanya to the bar on New Year's Eve, leading to a confrontation that ended in murder. They brought James in for questioning, but he denied any involvement in the crime. He also agreed to provide hair samples for comparison. Although experts were unable to extract DNA from the samples, they were able to compare the hairs under a microscope. The results showed that James' hair was significantly different from the hair found on Tanya's body and the towel. As a result, the police temporarily ruled him out as a suspect. Police focused on everyone who was at the bar on New Year's Eve. They asked Vanita if she had noticed anyone acting strangely or aggressively toward Tanya, but she said the evening had gone off without incident. Police also discovered that after Tanya split from her ex-husband, she had started dating a man named Kurt, who was a bartender at the bar where she spent New Year's Eve. Kurt was working the night of the murder. When questioned, Kurt denied any involvement in the crime, claiming he had gone to a New Year's party with friends after his shift. The police reviewed all the testimony and concluded that Kurt had enough time to commit the crime. Based on numerous interviews with people at the bar, the police determined that Tanya was last seen alive at 1:15 a.m., but no one saw her leave. The police also spoke with local residents where the body was discovered. A family reported driving past the scene at around 2 a.m. and were certain that there was no body at that time. This meant that Tanya was killed about 1.5 hours after she was last seen alive. During this time, Kurt was unable to provide an alibi. He volunteered to take a lie detector test, but the results were inconclusive, and further investigation revealed that Kurt's blood type did not match the killer's blood type, as determined by a semen sample. As a result, Kurt was cleared of the crime. Unable to analyze DNA from the killer's semen, and with no witnesses or concrete evidence, police could only assume that the perpetrator likely lived in the area where the body was discovered. The case had been closed for years due to lack of concrete evidence. Timothy, who was only 18 months old when his mother died, was raised by his father and Tanya's family. Together, they kept the truth about his mother's death a secret. When Timothy was 14 years old, he was informed that his mother had died in a car accident. As Christmas approached that year, out of curiosity, he searched his father's closet for his present, and Timothy stumbled upon a shocking letter addressed to television host Montel Williams, written by his father himself. In a letter, Timothy's father wrote asking for help in solving the murder of Timothy's mother, Tanya. The letter included a detailed account of the crime, which was the first time Timothy learned of his mother's tragic fate. Years later, in the early 2000s, police reopened Tanya's case, hoping that advances in DNA technology might help identify the killer. Police sent all available evidence to a lab for analysis. Experts discovered that the blood on a blue towel near Tanya's body came from a man, not Tanya. They created a DNA profile of the unidentified man and uploaded it to the FBI database. But there were no matches. The case was put on hold until 2015, when it was reopened, 30 years after the murder. Through investigation, the police discovered from the FBI's archive database that a person had some similarities with the DNA found at Tanya's crime scene. However, the match was not strong. To investigate further, the police learned about the person's family background and even contacted his relatives for assistance. These relatives cooperated and provided DNA samples for comparison. Unfortunately, the DNA analysis showed that his family was not involved in Tanya's death, leaving the police with no new leads. In 2018, a journalist named Tony Adam became interested in Tanya's case. Tony contacted the police offering help, and the police became suspicious of his involvement. Tony joined the investigation despite having no background in criminal investigations. The police, who had made little progress in the case, hoped that Tony's involvement wouldn't hinder the investigation. In 2019, a year after Tony got involved, police decided to identify the killer's relatives. This time, they enlisted the help of Parabon, a genetic genealogy company, and expanded the search to include primarily the DNA of known criminals. Parabon expanded its search to public genetic databases, which were much larger in scope. Unlike DNA evidence collected from a crime scene, these databases contain DNA samples that people have voluntarily uploaded to find relatives. To find the killer, experts used a process of elimination, carefully analyzing the family trees of potential relatives to identify someone who matched their suspect's criteria. They were looking for a man who was at least old enough to have committed the crime in 1985 and had a connection to the area where the crime was committed. In 2020, police identified a suspect in Tanya's murder. Daniel Wells, 57, had been arrested in the late 1980s for assault and indecent exposure. At the time, he was living in Pensacola, working as a carpenter and living with his wife and children. But to confirm whether Daniel was actually the killer, detectives needed to compare his DNA to the profile they collected from the crime scene. To prevent Daniel from fleeing, the police approached cautiously. They kept watch, waiting for an opportunity to collect a DNA sample from him without arousing Daniel's suspicion. Daniel threw a cigarette butt out of the car window near his workplace. The police collected the cigarette butt and immediately sent it to the lab for analysis. Experts extracted DNA from the saliva on the filter and compared it to the DNA of the killer in the Tanya case. The results were a match. The police eventually identified Daniel as the culprit and arrested him the same day. Despite the DNA test results, the police still tried to get Daniel to confess. They arranged for a patrol officer to stop Daniel's car under the pretext of doing a routine ID check. Detectives then approached Daniel, informing him that he needed to accompany them to the station without providing any further explanation. By withholding information, they intentionally kept Daniel in suspense, allowing them to proceed with the investigation cautiously. The police approached Daniel, informing him that he needed to come with them to the police station without further explanation. During the investigation, the detectives slowly steered the conversation toward Tanya's murder, asking Daniel about his whereabouts on the night of the murder. At first, he claimed to have never seen Tanya. However, when the detectives revealed that his DNA was found at the crime scene, his story began to unfold. As the questioning continued, Daniel's denials became increasingly unconvincing, and he grew more and more agitated. Detectives made it clear that the DNA evidence was irrefutable and that he would face consequences for his actions. As the interrogation continued, Daniel denied his guilt and became increasingly agitated. The police said the DNA evidence was incontrovertible and he would face the consequences for his actions. Faced with the evidence, Daniel finally broke down and began to speak. He and Tanya went to his house, where they had sex after drinking. However, an argument broke out, the argument escalated, and in a fit of rage, Daniel picked up a heavy wooden cutting board and hit Tanya over the head. When he realized she was dead, Daniel panicked and dumped her body in a location where it was later discovered. On his way back, Daniel discarded the Tanya's belongings and returned home. When questioned about the dog hairs found on the Tanya's clothes and towel, he attributed them to his roommate's black Labrador. Contrary to Daniel's claim that Tanya died from a head injury, the medical evidence clearly showed that the cause of death was strangulation. In a possible chain of events, Daniel struck Tanya in the head, but when he realized she was still alive, he resorted to strangling her. The police gathered enough evidence to arrest him for murder. Police then contacted Tanya's family, including her son Timothy, to inform them of the developments in the case. Timothy was deeply moved, thanking the police for finally identifying his mother's killer. 2 weeks after his arrest, Daniel's body was found in his cell. An investigation confirmed that he had committed suicide. Welcome back, detectives. Let's dive into another horrible case. The case of John Parker. John Parker was born in 1970 in Indiana, United States, to a middle-class family and have a brother. From a young age, John had a strong ambition to succeed. He valued being independent and continually sought ways to better himself, as well as looking for opportunities for growth and advancement. After graduating from high school, John began searching for ways to earn money. According to his brother, John's first job was as a waiter's assistant in a restaurant. However, he quit his job soon after, but the exact reason for his departure is unclear. Undeterred, John quickly found a new job that offered more freedom, allowing him to explore and develop his passion for pursuing a career in sales. John started working as a door-to-door salesman for Kirby vacuum cleaners. Initially, his family teased him, but he soon demonstrated his capabilities to everyone, and he also found his purpose in life. By the end of his first year, John had become one of the company's top salesmen, and he was eager to continue achieving more. John worked extremely long hours, typically between 12 to 16 hours a day. As a result, he became a top sales performer, earning recognition at company meetings. John's success also made him a source of inspiration and guidance for his fellow salespeople. During this time, he met Judy, a 20-year-old woman from a low-income family in Texas. Judy was born in October 1969. She was confident, extremely, and outgoing. Although John wasn't planning to hire any additional salespeople at the time, but she was able to convince John that she had what it took to achieve great success in sales. Judy's past was marked by significant life events. With her parents' consent, she had gotten married at the age of 14 and had 2 children, Christina and Daniel Hicks, but it ultimately ended in divorce. When she met John, she was determined to start a new chapter in her life. John decided to give Judy a chance, taking her under his wing as a mentor in vacuum cleaner sales. Not only did Judy prove herself as a valuable member of the sales team, but she also won John's heart. As time passed, they began to date. John's life was thriving, both personally and professionally. He has built a solid reputation for his sales and training abilities, and most importantly, he has the love and support of his wife Judy. John expanded on his experience by starting his own business in Michigan, specializing in selling and servicing Kirby vacuum cleaners. He also offered training sessions for salespeople, sharing his personal secrets and enthusiasm that had made him successful in the industry. John's company quickly rose to the top in the area, and he credited his success to Judy's support. After establishing his career, John and Judy got married in 1992. The couple had 2 daughters, Tiffany and Erica. As John's business continued to thrive, they relocated to better homes, providing their children with access to excellent schools, luxury cars, and regular vacations. Initially, John had a very good relationship with Judy's stepchildren, Christina and Daniel. Christina was a sweet girl, while Daniel was more energetic and mischievous. The family enjoyed a comfortable life, thanks to John's growing wealth. He openly showcased his success to motivate the young salespeople he trained, demonstrating the potential rewards of hard work and determination. However, as Judy's children entered their teenage years, problems arose. Christina associated with a group of friends who had unhealthy habits, and as a result she started drinking with them. According to some reports, Christina has also used drugs. Meanwhile, Daniel, 13, often appears angry and doesn't seem to fit in with his friends. On one occasion, Daniel took John's car and recklessly drove around the neighborhood with friends, damaging several mailbox posts. The next day, John visited each affected house, compensating the homeowners for the damage, to prevent them from filing a police report about the boys' actions. Around this time, John was also summoned to Daniel's school that the boy had misbehaved and they needed to discuss the issue. John and Judy's relationship became strained after he got into a physical altercation with Daniel. After 9 years together, Judy took her family to Texas to visit her childhood home and meet her brother. During the trip, Judy confided in her brother about her troubled marriage and John's mistreatment of her children. However, the situation was more complex. Judy's older children were misbehaving, and she took their side, which added to the tension. Things escalated when John suspected Judy of having an affair with one of his employees. John installed cameras in the office to gather evidence. When he obtained proof of Judy's infidelity, his life was turned upside down, and his demeanor changed drastically. He began to drink heavily, which led to intense arguments with Judy and rough treatment of their children. One incident involved his daughter Tiffany, who was beaten with a belt for not bringing her homework to school. When her teacher noticed the marks the next day, she reported it to social services. Before they arrived, John warned the 4 kids that if they wanted to maintain their luxurious lifestyle, they should say nothing about the beating. Consequently, Tiffany blamed her stepbrother Daniel. John's bad mood not only affected his family but also his employees and clients, who suffered from his outbursts of rage. To keep Judy away from her lover, John moved the family to an exclusive area in Crown Point, Indiana. Despite his hopes for a fresh start, things did not improve. Judy started to improve her appearance by losing weight and changing her look, while John let himself go, growing his beard, smoking, and wearing only jeans. He became increasingly distracted. The business struggled due to John's condition, nearly going bankrupt and forcing him to sell his boat to stay afloat. Office rumors swirled about Judy's alleged affair with Jeff, John's right-hand man, fueling more arguments. At one point, Judy told John she wanted a divorce, but it wouldn't be straightforward. John felt he had given Judy everything, rescuing her from poverty, accepting her children, and showering her with luxuries. When love turns to resentment, he began cutting off Judy's financial sources. John made it clear that if she left, she would leave with nothing, and he had a secret recording of her infidelity with the office employee. This was the situation at the start of 2003. The tension between John and Judy affected the children, whose behavior worsened. Even Tiffany was grounded during the holidays for starting a fire on school grounds with a friend. The arguments finally ended on Thursday, April 17, 2013, when John and Judy went out to dinner. They were likely looking for a way to resolve issues and reduce the tension between them. After dinner, the couple called home to check on their kids and told them they would be back soon. Then, Christina asked them to stop by the office because she had left a school notebook there. As John and Judy left the restaurant, John decided to bring the leftover dinner to Jeff, who was supposedly working late at the office. John and Judy arrived at the office, located in a deserted industrial area. Just before 10 p.m. John went inside to talk to Jeff, while Judy picked up Christina's notebook and returned to the car. A few minutes later, John came out of the office and opened the rear door on the driver's side of the car to look for something. Suddenly, two loud bangs were heard, and John collapsed on the ground. Judy and Jeff immediately called 911. Police and medical units arrived at the scene within minutes. Unfortunately, John, 33 years old, had been shot in the back of the head and was pronounced dead at the scene. When questioned by the police, Judy, who was inside the car when the incident happened, was unable to provide much information. Judy said she was sitting in the car when John came out of the office and opened the back door on the driver's side. Immediately, she heard two loud shots. Judy's reaction was to hide behind the seat. When she finally lifted her head, she caught a glimpse of a man in dark clothing running away from the car. Initially, it seemed like a robbery because John's wallet was missing. However, as investigators examined the scene more closely, they began to have doubts. John and Judy hadn't told anyone they would be there, which raised several questions. What were the chances of a random robbery in a deserted industrial are very rare. If the motive had been robbery, it's puzzling that the perpetrator would first kill John and then take his wallet. This is especially confusing since John was visibly wearing a valuable gold Rolex and other easily accessible jewelry. Typically, thieves would thoroughly search the victim's pockets in such situations. The fact that this didn't happen raises more questions than answers. Two bullet casings were found at the scene, which supports Judy's account of hearing two shots. One shot killed John instantly, but there's no official information about the second shot. With many unanswered questions, investigators started work taking a statement from Judy. Judy reported that her husband had argued with an employee from his company prior to the incident and identified the individual. However, she couldn't provide any additional information beyond her initial statement at the scene. Jeff, who was inside the office, also couldn't offer any useful insights, as when he heard the gunshots and went outside, it was all over. Meanwhile, authorities informed Christina, a Parker resident, that her stepfather had passed away. With robbery ruled out as a motive, detectives turned their attention to John's circle of relatives and colleagues. They began with an employee who had allegedly argued with John, but the employee claimed they had resolved their issues amicably and had a verified alibi. The investigation expanded, include John's business partners, employees, competitors, friends, and family. Judy's behavior during the funeral surprised and puzzled many people. As she seemed cheerful and socialized with friends, which was unexpected given the circumstances. Her ex-husband was also seen casually reading a newspaper at the funeral. For days after the murder, police brought in 15-year-old Daniel for questioning because he was accused of hiring gang members to kill his stepfather, John. When questioned, Daniel admitted to paying someone to hurt John, but claimed he only wanted him injured, not killed. The police arrested one of the young men that Daniel had hired, but they were released after their alibi checked out. Daniel was also released after 9 days due to lack of evidence and his status as a minor. Later, it was discovered that John had problems with Judy's children, which led to further investigation into Daniel and raised suspicions about Judy's 17-year-old daughter, Christina. When questioned, Christina denied any involvement, and this lead also went nowhere. However, investigators were left wondering who was providing the money for these schemes. And they suspected Judy was the source. Further investigation showed that Judy and John's relationship had gotten much worse before he died, and Judy's affair was discovered. However, sources revealed that John had no plans to leave his wife and was trying to save their relationship. Judy's main reason for targeting her husband seemed to be financial gain, as detectives found that John had 2 life insurance policies worth $1 million. After John's death, Judy tried to claim this money, but the insurance company initially refused to pay due to the ongoing investigation. Receiving the insurance money becomes even more complicated when John's father suspects Judy of being involved in his son's death. Despite these leads, the case stalled due to lack of concrete evidence. Over time, the John family household underwent substantial transformations. Judy was rarely at home, as she was busy with her new partner, Jeff, who was John's trusted manager. In Judy's absence, Christina and Daniel took care of Tiffany and Erica. Later, Judy and Jeff moved out of state with Tiffany and Erica, while Daniel went to live with his biological father. Christina, who was pregnant and had a boyfriend, stayed in the house. Although the investigation had stalled, authorities kept the case open, regularly reviewing the files in hopes of finding new leads. Their persistence paid off when they came to question some of Christina and Daniel's classmates. These schoolmates admitted to selling a firearm to Christina and Daniel. This information prompted detectives to investigate a piece of land owned by the family that Christina used for target practice. Upon inspection, several bullet casings were found. Laboratory analysis revealed a crucial clue: the bullet casings matched those from the crime scene where John was killed. In 2007, a colleague who was a narcotics officer provided additional information. The narcotics officer had been tracking Christina's ex-boyfriend, who was involved in a drug case and was arrested, to request a lighter sentence. Christina's former boyfriend revealed a conversation he had with Judy. In this conversation, Judy mentioned that her son Daniel was the one who fired the fatal shot that killed John. When confronted with this new information, 21 years old, Christina, who was linked to the weapon used in the crime, began to cooperate. She admitted to buying the weapon and calling John and Judy on the night of the incident. She had asked them to stop by the office, claiming she needed to pick up forgotten homework. Christina confessed to being part of a plan to kill John, with her brother Daniel designated as the shooter. When Daniel was 19, he was found and arrested in Arizona. Daniel was shown new evidence about the shooting and Christina's statement. He admitted to shooting John, but said his mother, Judy, was the one who planned the whole thing. Daniel said Judy had forged checks from her company to get the $7,500 to hire someone to kill John. However, when the people she hired took the money without doing the job, Judy told them to buy a gun for Daniel to use instead. Daniel also said it was Judy's idea to make up a reason for leaving the house that night by calling about homework. He said he shot John once in the head, and the second shot was an accident that happened while he was looking through John's pockets for his wallet, as his mother had told him to do. Daniel was also told to come back home without telling his younger sisters what had happened. His sister Christina helped by keeping the girls busy watching TV. Daniel said Judy convinced them to commit the crime by telling them they were being abused by John. And Judy promises them a better life with more money and freedom. It was also discovered that Judy had previously attempted to kill her husband. She had tried to poison his food, which resulted in John being briefly hospitalized with what was thought to be food poisoning. By the end of 2007, Christina and Daniel were formally charged with murder and conspiracy. Christina pleaded not guilty to conspiracy and was released on bail. In March 2008, Daniel, then 20 years old, pleaded guilty to conspiracy to kill his stepfather, John. As part of a deal, Daniel agreed to admit his guilt and testify against his mother. The prosecution agreed not to charge him with murder, but he still faced a prison sentence of 20 to 25 years. Daniel claimed that when he was 14, about a year before the incident, his mother and sister asked him to help kill John. His mother gave him and his sister money to buy a pistol, black clothing, gloves, and a mask to wear on the day of the crime. She also instructed him on what to do, including showering after the crime to remove gunpowder residue. Judy took responsibility for disposing of the evidence, including the gun, clothes, and her husband's wallet. In July 2009, 6 years after John's death, Judy turned herself in and pleaded guilty to conspiracy to commit murder. She admitted to planning, executing, and covering up the crime. The prosecution asked for a sentence of 28 to 35 years in prison. Judy, almost 40, was sentenced to 33 years in late August 2009. Daniel was sentenced to 23 years in September, and Christina received a 5-year sentence in October. Press reports state that Daniel was released from custody in 2017. He then chose to keep a low profile. Christina served 4 years of her sentence and was released in 2013, but she tragically died from a drug overdose. This case was driven by greed. Although Judy was successful, her greater desires led her to terrible crimes. Judy's actions not only destroyed a successful business owner but also had a profound impact on her 4 children. 2 of them ended up in prison, and the younger ones were left without their parents once again. Hi there, investigators. It's time to uncover the truth behind another case. The case of Rossana Galliano. Rossana Galliano was born in Buenos Aires, Argentina, in the late 1970s to parents Raldo and Graciela. She had 2 older brothers, Oscar and Gustavo, and a sister, Monica. During this time, Raldo, Rossana's father, worked as a mechanic. In 2001, Jose Arce brought his vintage car to Raldo's workshop for repairs. Jose was born on November 22, 1948. He spent more than 30 years living abroad, primarily in Greece and the United States. During his time in the United States, Jose was convicted of drug trafficking and served a 4-year prison sentence. He returned to Argentina in 1996 and owned 8 properties in a prestigious area of Buenos Aires. Despite their significant age difference, Jose and Rossana began dating shortly after meeting at her father's shop. At the time, Rossana was without a job and kept to herself, while Jose appeared to be financially stable. However, his wealth actually came from his mother, Elsa, who lived in the United States. Jose, who is 52 years old, proposed to Rossana, who is 22 years old. Rossana's mother, Graciela, expressed concerns about their significant age difference. Jose dismissed her worries, claiming that love knows no age. Rossana reassured her mother that she wanted to marry Jose, and they tied the knot on November 17, 2001, after a 7-month courtship. Jose initially thought his friendly and intelligent personality was the reason Rossana was attracted to him. They soon had a son, Geronimo. However, Jose's true nature soon became apparent, a controlling and jealous person. He frequently belittled Rossana and her family, and has eventually turned physically abusive, leaving Rossana feeling trapped and fearful. Jose's ownership of 2 guns added to his intimidating presence, allowing him to maintain control over Rosanna. Her family was aware of the situation and the pain it caused. Jose often flaunted his guns in front of visitors or when visiting others. On one occasion, Rosanna's brother Oscar witnessed Jose physically assaulting her while they were painting their house. On another occasion, Rosanna's father observed bruises on her back, bruises that she explained were caused by Jose dragging her on the ground. Rosanna and Jose had their second child, but their relationship continued to deteriorate. Jose's hot temper and lack of respect have repeatedly strained their relationship, making it difficult for her to maintain a healthy home for her children despite her best efforts. The situation was further complicated by Jose's mother, Elsa, who would visit from time to time and exert control over their household decisions. By 2006, Rosanna had suffered severe abuse at the hands of Jose and decided to report him to the authorities for domestic violence. A few months later, Rosanna filed a second complaint, this time she requesting a medical examination to document her injuries. Rosanna opened up to her sister Monica about her struggles, and they made a promise to stay connected and be there for each other whenever Rosanna needed assistance. Monica becomes Rosanna's rock, comforting and supporting her emotionally during difficult times. Whenever Rosanna visited Monica's apartment with her children, Jose would often dictate when they had to return home, threatening to harm her. He frequently belittled Rosanna, questioning her ability to be a mother. Ultimately, Rosanna decided to leave Jose and move in with Monica, leaving him to stay in their house alone. Rosanna filed another complaint and sought a divorce, which led to a restraining order being issued against Jose. As a result, they were only allowed to meet at a neutral location in El Remanso Exel de la Cruz, as arranged by the court, for Jose to visit their child. During one of her visits, Rosanna confided in Daniel Gonzalez, a married man, who worked as a gardener and lived nearby with his own daughter. Although there were rumors about a relationship between Rosanna and Daniel, this was never confirmed. Meanwhile, Jose continued to make threats against Rosanna, including a disturbing voicemail, in which Jose explicitly threatened to kill her, and she shared this message with her brother Oscar. In 2007, Rosanna met Oscar Lugo at a bar while socializing with friends. He was 32 years old, lived in Marino, and worked in a sewing workshop. They quickly connected, exchanged numbers, and began dating. Oscar was a kind, attentive, and gentleman who listened to Rosanna. At 29 years old, Rosanna felt like she was rediscovering a life she had almost forgotten. However, their budding relationship was soon threatened by Rosanna's ex-husband, Jose. He closely monitored Rosanna's activities and was aware of her new relationship with Oscar. Jose wants to prevent his divorce from Rosanna and is terrified when he hears that Rosanna has started a new relationship. He offers give Rosanna a truck in exchange for ending her relationship with Oscar Lugo, but she refuses. When Rosanna had a severe nervous breakdown, it was Oscar who accompanied her to the hospital. Out of desperation, Jose devised a plan with the help of his mother Elsa. They secretly planned to hire an assassin to kill Rosanna. On January 16, 2008, Rosanna and her sister Monica went to El Reno to pick up Rosanna's 2 sons, aged 4 and 3, from their father Jose. However, Jose delayed the handover, making excuses. At 9:15 p.m., Jose called Rosanna, claiming their son Geronimo had a fever and that he would take him to the hospital and return him the next day. Rosanna insisted on taking care of Geronimo herself, but the call ended abruptly. Rosanna then sent a casual text message to Oscar Lugo at 9:53 p.m. about their plans for the next day. At 10 p.m., Rosanna and Monica sat down for dinner when Jose called again. This time, Rosanna stepped out into the garden to get better phone reception. Unbeknownst to her, a person was hiding behind the trees. As she was on the phone, the person emerged and shot Rosanna 4 times with a .45 caliber gun. Monica, who was inside, heard the shots and saw Rosanna stumble and collapse. Panicked, Monica tried to call 911 but was unsuccessful. She then asked her boyfriend to alert the police. Meanwhile, Oscar Lugo tried to contact Rosanna at 11 p.m. but couldn't reach her. He then tried to call Monica but got no response. The police investigation revealed that the shooter had entered the property through an adjacent vacant lot. A witness reported seeing someone fleeing through a gap in the fence but couldn't provide a clear description due to the darkness. Jose was questioned by the police and appeared shocked. After requesting a lawyer, he let the lawyer handle the proceedings and left the next day. During a thorough search of the area, a red sweater was discovered that Rosanna's family believed belonged to Jose, which led them to suspect him of the crime. The case quickly gained widespread media attention, shocking the nation and sparking a scandal. Jose and his mother publicly maintained his innocence and criticized Rosanna, claiming that she had multiple sexual partners and that they should be investigated for this crime instead of Jose. Following the incident, Daniel, the gardener, became withdrawn and isolated, refusing to speak to anyone. On the night of Rosanna's funeral, Raldo noticed Jose watching from a distance in a truck, but he did not attend the funeral or offer any condolences. Jose's defense team then shifted their focus to Monica, who was Rosanna's sister and the only witness to the case. They questioned Monica's credibility, pointing out 2 key inconsistencies in her story. Firstly, Monica did not have any blood on her clothes, which raised suspicions about her account of what happened. Secondly, instead of immediately helping her younger sister, Monica chose to run and get her phone. However, this theory lacked supporting evidence. The investigators presented a strong argument that the murder weapon was too heavy for a woman to handle. They also pointed out that the killer likely knew the house well, as they would have been aware that Rosanna had to go outside to get a cell phone signal. This suggests that the crime was planned in advance. During the investigation, Rosanna's sons were cared for by their father and paternal grandmother Elsa, and their grandmother Graciela was allowed to visit them. However, Monica and Oscar are not allowed near the children, as Jose expresses concern for his son's safety. Despite the court's restrictions, the children still wanted to see Aunt Monica, so Jose allowed them to visit her. During these visits, Monica took the children to see a psychologist. Eventually, Graciela was granted visitation rights to her grandchildren, though not guardianship. In an interview, Jose made some serious allegations about Rosanna, claiming she had 4 lovers who all had run-ins with the law. Jose suspects Rosanna of being involved with these men, and she has been gathering information about them for blackmail. Meanwhile, Oscar was given protection as a witness in his sister's case, which included wearing a tracking device and having a police escort. By the end of 2007, investigators still hadn't found enough evidence to charge any of the suspects. However, a significant turning point occurred in January 2008 when Jose was arrested and charged with aggravated homicide. This charge was based on 3 key factors: his connection to the victim, evidence that suggested he had planned the crime in advance, and the fact that multiple people were involved in the crime. On January 28, 2008, the preliminary hearings began. At the hearings, 4 people, including Raldo, Graciela, Monica, and Oscar, described Jose's disturbing behavior, including his repeated use of violence and weapons to threaten others. Rosanna's mother also presented the prosecutor with the last text messages her daughter had sent before her death. The following day, Oscar Lugo, who used to date Rosanna, testified against Jose, provided testimony similar to that of Rosanna's family. According to Oscar Lugo, Jose had tried to ruin his and Rosanna's reputations by spreading false rumors. Oscar Lugo said Rosanna suspected Jose's fabrications were intended to discredit her as she and Jose were about to divorce. Opposite, José's lawyer disputed the claims that José was emotionally unstable and aggressive. On February 7, 2008, José's mother, Elsa, traveled from the United States to testify in a 12-hour investigative session. However, Rosana's family began to suspect that José's mother might have been involved in her murder. This suspicion led Raldo and Graciela's lawyer to consider requesting José's mother's arrest. In response, José and his mother's lawyer argued that her testimony actually showed she was prioritizing her grandchildren's well-being. According to Elsa's testimony, she purchased houses for them because she believed the divorce settlement would not negatively impact them. The lawyer also denied the media's claim that José's mother and Rosana had a poor relationship. Despite ongoing speculation and media coverage surrounding the circumstances of Rosana's death, José was released on bail and gained custody of his children. Meanwhile, the court deemed it unnecessary to provide police protection for Oscar, Rosana's brother, who worked as a taxi driver. However, on July 5, 2008, Oscar was attacked by two armed men in the early morning. They beat and threatened him for an hour before abandoning him in a vacant lot. Fortunately, Oscar was found thanks to the protective witness tracking bracelet he wore. Oscar was deeply shaken by the event, though not severely injured. The trial next began in April 2013. José maintained his innocence throughout the proceedings. However, in May, the trial was delayed when José suffered a stroke, pushing the final verdict back to November 2013. The judge determined that the murder was carefully and deliberately planned, bearing the hallmarks of organized crime. The court concluded that José and Elsa were involved in planning the attack. They deliberately chose the time and place to put Rosana in a passive position and unable to defend herself. Specifically, they targeting her after a phone call would lure her outside. The court ultimately determined that José's primary motive for the murder was financial, because he did not want to divide the joint property with Rosana. As a result, José and Elsa were sentenced to life imprisonment. The higher court upheld the conviction, emphasizing José's threatening behavior, the domestic violence Rosana suffered, and the significant influence his mother had over him. Years later, in 2015, José and Elsa were granted house arrest due to health and age concerns, respectively. This allowed them to be reunited with their children. Throughout this time, the media continued to follow the story of the children. In January 2017, the court allowed the children to spend a weekend with their maternal grandparents for the first time. The Rosana Galliano family thoroughly prepared their home, repainting and cleaning the house, and decorating it with balloons and a welcome sign. Graciela also cooked the children's favorite meal in anticipation of their arrival. The Rosana Galliano home was filled with joy that weekend, as the boys spent happy time together, playing soccer and video games, and even asked to sleep in their grandmother's bed, whom they hadn't seen in over 2 years. However, their happiness was short-lived. On November 24, 2018, José passed away after suffering another stroke. This was a devastating blow for the children. Aunt Monica reassured them with love and calmness, promising to support whatever decision they made. The boys decided to live with Aunt Monica,